I just realized that we had not gone live, and I had been checking over some things. Obviously, it's been 4 minutes. I wanted to make sure all the stream elements were indeed ready, because sometimes you're checking something, and you're like, "Oh no, it's not working. Why is it not working?" But at least the videos looked like they were working, and all of that. So that's going to be pretty easy for me to just kind of jump into. But how's it going, guys? I see two people in the chat. Hello, even if you guys don't say anything, it's good to have you here. What's on the docket tonight is going to be two videos that I'm going to be talking about. The first one being why Americans don't like Shin Godzilla, and the second one being in defense of Godzilla 98. The first one is going to be the one I'm going to be doing. It's only 4 minutes. That's the Shin Godzilla one. And the in defense of Godzilla 98 is going to be the longer of the two. And given the fact that it is like a full hour, it's going to take longer for us to go through than an hour. So hopefully that is a good time. What's up, Brandon? But in the meantime, I'm actually going to just do a check on a few things just to make sure that things are working, especially when it comes to the audio of a few things. Because that's one of the great things of a production, is just that nothing ever always goes right. And of course, for everyone who's watching the Super Bowl, I hope you all enjoying yourselves. And if you are here because you're not a football fan, then in that case, welcome. You're very much appreciated for being here. What's up, JL? It's been a long time. Thank you for joining the stream. But yeah, we're just going to share some of the screens here, make sure the audio is working, and just make sure how this works. It goes fine. So that one looks fine. Let me make sure, hopefully the audio works well. I'm just going to play through the first few minutes and hear back to myself. Okay. Obviously, that's the Defense of Godzilla 98 one. I just want to hear it on the stream itself, see if I hear anything. Nope. Okay. So it's not going to work that way. So I'm actually have to do a full screen share that one. So, okay. That's how it's going to work. Stop sharing. And it's going to be like this. What I should probably do is that since it does do video files now, I might just start downloading the videos rather than sharing the screens that way. But I'm sharing the audio. Yes. Stream session for a little bit. Now we got that here. Let me make sure. Good. Okay. So we'll start off with why Americans don't like Shin Godzilla. Of course, I will be looking at the chat from a different window on my screen so that I can still keep on top of things. How's the audio looking? It's looking good.
Godzilla 2014 was the embodiment of America. Apart from the massive budget and largest scale Godzilla ever seen on screen, it Americanized an iconic Japanese brand effectively. As the immortal James Rolfe once said, TriStar rapes the name, and America needed to prove that it could indeed make a decent Godzilla movie. However, not everyone in Japan felt so in love. After all, Godzilla was literally born from the hydrogen bombs dropped on Hiroshima and Nagasaki. However, in Godzilla 2014's origin, it was America using the H-bomb to help destroy Godzilla. You know, not kill hundreds of thousands of people.
Now, I know that this was something he talked about in the comments of his videos, that he mixes up the H-bomb test and then the atomic bombs dropped on Hiroshima and Nagasaki. It does kind of feel like a rookie mistake to confuse those two bombs, but the premise of what he's trying to say is that it would be disrespectful for the Americans who specifically dropped the bombs on Japan to then make a Godzilla movie about the bombs actually being the good or a better alternative, and they're trying to kill Godzilla to save the world. In terms of how much we know Toho had input on the 2014 scripts, we can't really say, and I've always held this belief about Toho, especially when it comes to the executives, it is that they aren't necessarily the creatives who are working behind these films. They are usually the suits who just want to make sure there is at least a return on investment. So for them, they probably might not care as much. I would love to hear anybody who does interviews with the directors, suit actors, etc., and their feelings about that, since it's going to be a lot closer to them. But in terms of from a world building perspective, on its own, that is kind of weird. But considering the fact that America for 2014, Godzilla is at least a neutral good for the world. America doing this isn't exactly in the best light, but again, it's not the worst thing in the world, and it's also kind of bad that he is confusing both Hiroshima and Nagasaki with the H-bomb tests.
To say that we heroically used the H-bomb in order to reinvent a famous Japanese monster is insanely offensive. Instead of
It's interesting that he mentions that too. Is that if it is offensive, I'm surprised that there really wasn't much outrage about it. Considering the fact that like there was always a lot of pushback towards 98 when that came out, there was a lot of pushback against other things that happened in 2014 that no one, even the creatives at Toho, brought this up is interesting to say the least.
throwing a temper tantrum like most countries, Japan wanted to show us Americans how to make a real Godzilla film. Shin Godzilla.
And it's also interesting to note that he says that like they tried to show up legendary when really, if anything, just the overall success of Godzilla 2014 is why Toho decided to come out of quote unquote retirement and then start making new Godzilla films. And then because of the success of both the MonsterVerse and Shin Godzilla, they saw it as financially beneficial to start releasing both at the same time, which is why we have things like Singular Point, and then why we got the MonsterVerse to continue and is continuing right now in the future.
Was Japan's response to the 2014 smash hit. But this stick measuring contest between America and Japan goes way back to the original 1954 Godzilla. After the Second World War, America reveled in high-grossing war films about the Allies' triumphant victory over the Axis. Films like A Walk in the Sun and The Desert Fox were so popular that even former Axis countries were jealous. Japanese filmmakers wanted to heal their audiences with the heroism of their soldiers, but couldn't. That would be like if Germany released Triumph of the Will post-war, as opposed to 1935.
So the premise that he's making is that Godzilla, well, the Japanese film industry was trying primarily to make films to sort of comfort their soldiers. And well, from what we do know about Godzilla, In the Shadow of Glory was what was originally going to be made, and it was afterwards, once the idea that Godzilla came, that they decided, you know what, we're actually going to make a monster movie. And gets outside of like Honda, for example. Sure, EJ Tsuburaya, he specifically wanted to make monster movies, so it was less like I couldn't make war films, so instead I made a monster movie, because we do know that EJ Tsuburaya did work on propaganda war films, so the framing is just a little weird in my opinion.
We just don't do it. But instead of ripping off of American cinema, the idea of the Japanese army saving the people from a giant monster was...
And that's entirely not the point of Godzilla. And if we're talking about ripping off an American film, that just comes off as just really, really weird to say the least, considering the fact that, oh boy, oh my goodness. Wow. So, obviously we all know that King Kong is the first giant monster movie, and then of course, well, technically, and then we have the Beast from 20,000 Fathoms, which then helps inspire Godzilla. So really, if we are being as disingenuous as possible, for in the sake of Godzilla, if we're trying to steelman Godzilla was not indeed ripping off American movies, then we could point to a lot of differences between Godzilla and King Kong and Godzilla from Beast from 20,000 Fathoms. But we really can't say that, because we know for a fact that the creators behind the first Godzilla movie were indeed influenced by these things. Although we can't call them a ripoff, we can say that it's without a doubt inspired. However, because of how it is very much an anti-American video in so many ways, trying to say that Godzilla was no way influenced by American cinema at the time, or even that Godzilla was glorifying the military, especially when Honda, even though being a soldier, was not someone who glorified war in any way or was trying to paint the Imperial Japanese Army as some all good forces. Really weird framing. But what's up, Bioman? Right now we're just discussing the video, why Americans don't like Shin Godzilla. And right now we're just at the framing point of the video.
Was born, hence the original Gojira. The creature's atomic undertones reminded the Japanese people of the horrors of the war without blatantly vilifying the United States. This was a smart move because 2 years later, it was released in America, adding scenes with famous American actor Raymond Burr, and it did quite well. Through the decades, Godzilla was reinvented multiple times and became a superstar among Japanese cinema. When it came time to resurrect Godzilla in 2016, Toho decided to tie their favorite monster's origin to more current issues. Right now, Japan has a problem with dumping toxic waste into the ocean, and Toho thought to make Godzilla a product of climate change, as opposed to giving America more attention than it already has. Not to be political, but the United States is one of the leading deniers of climate change in the world. So a foreign film trying to spread awareness of a controversial topic is more than enough to kill a movie at the box office.
So, it definitely, without a doubt, Godzilla's origins and Shin are tied a lot more to a current radiological disaster, and then the original, because of course we don't really have to deal with the threat of nuclear annihilation anymore. So instead of being resurrected or reawoken, mutated stuff by the bombs, we are looking at a film that has Godzilla being tied to radioactive dumping by the Japanese. However, while you're comparing it, talking about U.S. climate change denial makes no sense to me. And we're seeing more people in here. What's up, Toku Society? And by the way, Toku, you lied about that footage. I will forever hold that against you. But if no one, probably a bunch of people don't know at all what I'm talking about, but that's just gonna be an inside joke for anyone who does understand what was going on there. Probably that wasn't your intention, Toku, and it sucks that wasn't actually extra footage from Cotton, by the way. But back to this video. The thing is that the film is a lot more of a political satire than it really is an ecological critique, because once again, it ties very little to the issue of radioactive dumping or even Japan's relations with nuclear power in any way like that. It has more to do with the lack of relief that the Japanese government was giving at the time. And although a lot of that is intertwined with how Godzilla was dumping, or not Godzilla, how the Japanese government wasn't really clear about the issues the Fukushima reactors were behaving and how much nuclear energy was actually being put into the air and all of that. It's again, very little has to do with talking about the environment. And again, we've seen environmentalist Godzilla films before, and this one isn't it.
It made less than 1/5 of the money Godzilla 2014 made. The year it came out didn't help either.
Okay, no. Okay, define this. Why is it because Trump came out that Shin Godzilla didn't do well? Like, please, if you're gonna make a claim like this, please do, because again, like, this is coming from someone who actually saw Shin in theaters. Like, the theater that Shin aired at for me, that was probably about 5-6 miles away from my normal theater that I usually go to, and both of them are the same thing. They're both showcase cinemas, and it just so happened that the showcase that Shin aired at, it airs usually foreign films naturally. Sometimes it's had film festival stuff now. I believe now actually it is taken down, so I don't even know if any Godzilla films or like foreign ones are going to be shown anywhere close to me again. I'm going to have to really go out of my way to actually like go and see these films on the big screen if I want to. But trying to say that this is tied to Trump is why Shin Godzilla didn't do well, but you're not qualifying it at all. It doesn't make any sense. Like, if you're saying, oh, this is why it didn't do well, explain why.
Godzilla 2014 also had very little originality. Its monster design was clearly a combination of 90s and 2000s Godzilla. But since most of those movies weren't released in the United States, American audiences were ignorant in the fact that they were getting a regurgitated version of an already cool redesign.
Wait. You're also saying that 2014 is a combination of Heisei Godzilla and 2000s Godzilla. What? And you're saying that most of these films weren't even released in America, like, and then you show footage of Godzilla against Mechagodzilla. Fair enough, I guess. but people had seen Godzilla 2000. That was still something people knew about. And then as for Heisei Godzilla, at least 84 came out in cinemas, so there's that. And if you're saying it's a combination of those two Godzillas still share a lot in common with each other, which they do with 2014, which they all share a lot with Showa Godzillas, and therefore 54. This idea that certain Godzilla designs that you don't like or are trying to bash are just combinations of other designs doesn't work, because of course an iconic character is going to have a lot of iconic traits be shared across different designs. And what exactly about the design itself makes it a combination of those two designs? I don't really know how you're able to extrapolate this point. But Toku, as for how we know Shin did in the States, to some degree, we know it obviously didn't do the best. It had very limited screening. I don't know the numbers off the top of my head. Someone who's a little bit better with numbers, I'd totally have to be more specific. I'd have to probably ask some people to pull up the numbers. But like, for what it was, it just it didn't do all that amazing. But again, like, it did really well in Japan. It just had a very limited screening in America. And because it had very limited screening in America and there wasn't a lot of advertising, of course, it's not going to do amazing. Like, this isn't rocket science, and it's not malicious to imply that because we don't like Shin Godzilla, we didn't give it a lot of like market release. It's a dumb argument.
But fans here flipped out when they saw what Shin Godzilla looked like. They thought his radioactive zombie-like appearance was rancid. Did they even see the first film?
Okay. So Shin Godzilla looks bad because he looks like a zombie, but then you're comparing it to the 54 Godzilla, which looks far less irradiated than Shin. Like, I'm not like, of course, Shin and 54 share a lot of similar design elements, but looking at 54 compared to Shin, they still look very, very different enough to distinguish them as completely separate entities. It's not like where, hypothetically, if someone was to look at the 55 Godzilla suit and the 54 Godzilla suit, I could believe someone would be able to not be able to tell the difference, someone who isn't a fan. But those two designs, they definitely look very different. And Shin also is a lot more horror-like in its appearance. So that may be off-putting for some people who just see Godzilla as a just giant radioactive dinosaur, and that is completely fine. That there is nothing wrong with just wanting a more almost realistic or animalistic looking Godzilla versus Shin, which is very much clearly more mutated. And there's some design aspects that just don't meld for people. Like, I don't really personally like the tail ending on Shin. I've never really liked that. I've always preferred just a regular tail. And of course, that ties into his powers, which is fine. But I still just subjectively, I don't like that part of his design. Same thing with his arms. I think his arms are really, really small. Of course, that adds to the fact that he's not really all there. He's kind of malformed in those aspects. So that's why his arms are super, super small. So it's a really, really weird argument to compare Shin and 54 and then not explain it. A lot of this video, it's 4 minutes, mind you, but there's just so much lacking. That is the biggest issue, is that it's lacking. 54 Godzilla's design has implications. Some things are similar to radiation burns. Such design has the subtlety of a sledgehammer. Exactly. Yeah, no. Shin very much is overtly radioactive and mutated. 54 Godzilla has very small inklings of it that if you weren't really told or you didn't know better, it would just go over your head. So.
Also, they criticized the use of CGI in the film, as Toho traditionally uses a man in a suit, but it was completely fine when Americans did it. Granted, in the beginning of the movie, it did look pretty bad, but if you don't like bad special effects, why the fuck are you watching a Godzilla movie? That's like one of his trademarks.
That's another thing I don't like. If we're gonna talk about CGI being good or bad, we shouldn't really say that, oh well, Godzilla's got bad CGI. It's part of the charm. For the era, especially Godzilla 54, and even some of the later stuff, like from Godzilla 60, like Godzilla vs. King Kong, Godzilla vs. The Thing, Ghidorah. Compare those to things like It Came From Beneath the Sea or Tarantula, Giant Gila Monster, stuff like that. The effects are definitely a lot more creative, and I would say, based on what they're able to do, a lot more convincing than some of the American stuff that was being made either along the same time or within a similar time period. And not to mention the fact that the budgets between Shin and Legendary are so different. It's really weird that this comparison is even being made, but What's also weird is I understand that there's some people for some reason who think that Japan should never ever use CGI for Godzilla. He should only be a man in a rubber suit. It should only be tokusatsu. That is completely fine. I don't necessarily agree with the sentiment. I do believe that within the realms of CGI, we are getting to the point where it is becoming a lot better, and therefore it is without a doubt acceptable to use CGI when necessary. And of course, I think that it would be a good idea to still use suits. The Godzilla versus Hedorah, that little small Godzilla celebration short film thing they did, the suitmation wasn't the best, but if they actually kind of melded CGI with suitmation and they put a lot more effort and had bigger budgets into it, that may turn out something really amazing. But just kind of having the quote unquote Americans' feelings about Shin be summed up in a lot of points that are so disparate from one another, they don't become coherent, is really bad. And it feels very bad faith, because I think he should know, if he's making this video, he should know at least that, hey, some of these things don't make sense. I'm categorizing so many people into one group that it's not going to be working properly. This doesn't make any sense. But I think because he wants to get this point across, and in my opinion, just be anti-American for some reason, that this is what he's come to.
You're not going to believe this, but some fans actually boycotted the movie because he had purple fire.
Citation without a doubt needed. I know people said they really didn't like the purple atomic breath, but please, if you're gonna make really outlandish claims like this, please cite a source. Please. This is. I hate this so much when people make a claim, but they don't cite it or even try to allude to it. Like, explain maybe like, oh, this is what I saw on somewhere. Like, I saw this on Facebook, I saw this on Twitter, I saw this on Instagram. This person said this. At least then I know, oh, you're probably referring to a specific person, not Americans, trademarked, I guess. Like, again, it feels really bad faith with what he's trying to do.
Are you kidding me? Godzilla never only had one fire color. He's had white.
Because of the being black and white, of course, his beam is going to be white. Most of the times when we've seen this Godzilla's atomic breath in color, it's usually blue.
Blue.
Yep, so blue.
Orange.
Ironically enough, with orange, I have seen old forum posts where people are upset that Godzilla's breath was orange because it kind of went into the common misconception that Godzilla shoots fire. So it's interesting that there are some people back in the day when Godzilla 2000 was coming out who did not like the orange atomic breath. But yeah, no, essentially Godzilla's almost always had blue atomic breath. And even if we say, well, it was white in these black and white movies, we have seen visuals of both Godzillas outside where in color the beam is usually portrayed as white.
And red. But what, is purple not good?
And then red's always been used for the spiral array. I don't really have a problem with that either. And again, I've always found it weird that people have an issue with Godzilla's breath. I mean, I liked it when Godzilla in Godzilla series had green atomic breath. That's never been an issue with me, where the breath color was significantly important. It doesn't usually break lore where Godzilla's breath is concerned, unless, for example, in the Heisei continuity, his normal breath became red, which does happen, and we know exactly why.
Good enough? That's like if I boycotted the Attack of the Clones because I didn't like the color of Mace Windu's lightsaber. I don't know where you thought I was going.
Yeah, we all know what you're trying to do. It's not clever. It's this is why I think that's malicious, is because he brings up the example of Mace Windu and his lightsaber, and then makes this joke and talk about why Americans don't like Shin Godzilla. This is why I think this stops being like good, and I think this starts becoming really bad faith and overtly malicious, and that's why I don't like it. So that's disconcerting.
That I saw Shin Godzilla in Times Square in an empty theater 2 months after it came out in Japan. Maybe if it had a worldwide release it would have done better, but if fans are so resistant to change, they could watch fucking Star Wars. I wouldn't be so mad at this if Japan and America were both making Godzilla movies at the same time. That would be great. It'd be more Godzilla for me. But no, Legendary Pictures made a deal that Toho can't make any.
When did they say this? Where has it been said that Legendary can't make other Godzilla films?
More Godzilla movies until after 2020.
No, well, it's never been. I don't know where people keep getting this from, and maybe I'm just wrong. Maybe it's just something I keep missing or I keep forgetting about. But I've never heard this before, that they could not make any other Godzilla films or new Godzilla content until the Monsterverse was finished. That's clearly not the case. And this video was made before Singular Point, so I'm not sure. Maybe this is it's really interesting because he's kind of going into he's falling prey to these rumors that the Western side of the fandom seems to always fall into, and it's really annoying and it needs to stop, please.
Or do they think that it would subtract from their sales? Am I supposed to get shittier Godzilla movies because my country wants to pretend that we're not polluting the environment? I just don't know what to say. If you want to watch a 2.5-hour movie about America stroking its own military with only 8 minutes of Godzilla screen time, be my guest. I'm gonna go get some popcorn and watch some Shin Godzilla.
Yeah, again, this is why I think you're being I think this person is being overtly malicious and just anti-American because he makes the America's climate change denying. Oh, Trump is why Shin Godzilla didn't do well because it came out the year he was elected. Oh, wow, I made a Mace Windu lightsaber joke. Herder, what am I really talking about? America? And then, of course, criticizes 2014, which, again, is fair enough to it. You can criticize 2014. There's a lot of things wrong with the film. The script is really bad. How Godzilla is used well, but then he's not used enough to justify a lot of things in that film. And trying to say that, oh, yeah, well, because of what Legendary did, I'm not getting my good Godzilla content. And this kind of smug belief that this is why Shin Godzilla didn't do well or why Americans don't like Shin is utterly ridiculous. And it feels like you just really wanted to just dunk on America. And I'm sorry. That's what it feels like. And it feels like you're being really disingenuous.
This is Trusty Milkshake, and I'll leave you with this greatness.
Real quick. Oh, hey. What's it called? I'm not sure how many people follow Bestazilla, but there's this little thing. So we now know where you got this clip from. But yeah, that's why Americans don't like Shin Godzilla. Now, just really, really disingenuous video. And again, it was made in 2018. This is bad. And of course, some people are gonna say, "Oh, you're making a video about a YouTuber with 20 and 282 subscribers. How could you do that?" Again, public platform. You're without a doubt welcome to critique something, and if they want to respond to the stream, they are more than happy to do so. But wow, was this bad? Like really bad. But I don't know. Legendary made it so Toho can't make it always makes a fucking trilogy. Yeah. I don't know. I really don't know. This dude is one of those Godzilla fans that cannot enjoy Godzilla films unless they're deep moral cinephiles. Yeah, no, literally. And the next person we're going to be going over, ironically enough, is going to have a very similar kind of feel about it, which kind of sucks, but it just feels like sometimes either Godzilla films attract people who want something very surface level or people who are like, let me look at how really actually deep this truly is. But I don't know. Back into the stream section. And this is by David J. Bradley. He's the guy who did In Defense of Godzilla 98. Just want to take an overview of the channel real quick. So this is the guy. No, I don't want to hear that. So this is his channel. He's not really like someone who does a lot of Godzilla content. If we want, let's also look at Trusty Milkshake here. Both these guys aren't really Godzilla YouTubers per se. They just have videos like even here, like very little content. And the last video he ever produced was 3 years ago. But in the case of Bradley, again, he's only done a couple Godzilla videos. He did this one, the political Godzilla, which there's still a few issues with it, but it's not as bad as Trusty Milkshake's video. And then he also did a Godzilla King of the Monsters video. However, he deleted it. And the reason he deleted it was because he felt he was being a little too nice on the film when he believes the film is explicitly pro-nuclear. And he talks about that here and why King of the Monsters broke him. However, he also has this video, which is The Last Jedi is really, 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 really good. I have not seen the video. I have no interest in seeing the video, but I think it's really clear that based on that video alone, we're going to have very different views about probably film as a whole. But I don't want to let that impact me overall on the video when I'm talking about it here. But it's just something to keep note of. And I know, Bio, I know you would love to riff on me with these people, specifically with this one. If this guy actually does respond or he like wants to talk about it, I'd rather just talk to him person to person. But if I find something else that's really bad, we'll try to get the guys together to do this. So let's get into it.
Ladies, gentlemen, and MBs, just your heads up that this video contains discussions of nuclear war, nuclear weapons testing, and on-screen medication use. So, you know the drill.
Cannes, France. Going to see Godzilla at the Palais of the Cannes Film Festival is like attending a satanic ritual in St. Peter's Basilica. It's a rebuke to the faith that the building represents. Cannes touchingly adheres to a belief that film can be intelligent, moving, and grand. Godzilla is a big, ugly, ungainly device to give teenagers the impression that they are seeing a movie. It was the festival's closing film, coming at the end like the horses in a parade. Perhaps for the same reason.
Now, that's a quote by Roger Ebert. I think, as anyone should know, Roger Ebert was never a monster movie fan. He has, if you've looked at his review of King Kong, a lot of the support to it is very begrudging. Same thing with things like Alien, The Thing. He did not like The Thing. However, for some reason, he really liked Anaconda, which I'm not sure why. Maybe because, again, it was very much like a B movie, and he was just like, oh, her B movie. I can just turn off my brain and like it. He didn't like Jurassic Park. The guy did not like genre movies at all. That's something that should be known, is that he's never been someone who liked genre films, and a lot of films he liked were not amazing films, mind you. And I think the reason why people have such an attachment to Ebert and Siskel is the fact that they were kind of the premieres in terms of what they liked or didn't like, influenced a generation. It's the same thing with influencers too on YouTube. If someone does not like something and they are big in the industry or they're big on YouTube, then that will impact public perception to a great degree. And I think a lot of the reason why people shy away from film, especially genre films, for the longest time had to do with the perception that those two did indeed pioneer. I don't think that's and I don't think they were doing it maliciously, mind you, but it is something to take note of.
Huh. It has been a minute since I talked about Godzilla on this channel. In fact, the people who only found my channel in the last year or so, which is most of you, let's be honest, might not even know that I'm a Godzilla fan. I've seen all the movies, and I love talking about the good chunky lizard boy.
I don't know why, but why does it feel like anytime people who aren't usually like their channel isn't completely revolving around Godzilla, they always have to make it known to everyone that they are big Godzilla fans? I don't know. It just feels like a trend. Like the meta of non-Godzilla content YouTubers is to then say, "Hey guys, did you know I'm a Godzilla fan?" I assume you would be if your video is called "In Defense of Godzilla '98." But I don't know. Just feels weird. Just feels weird, man.
Godzilla is simply a fascinating subject with a rich history and deep themes to discuss. And also, he punches the other big friends real good, and that's pretty neat. Godzilla was honestly one of my favourite subjects to make videos about. But the last time I talked about Godzilla, it was because I was in the midst of one of the worst depression spirals in my life.
Yeah, so that's the video talking about the King of the Monsters Broken video. And like what I gained from it, I watched over it a couple times before stream started, and his main gripe is the fact that he feels the film is indeed pro-nuclear. I don't usually subscribe to that feeling. I don't think it's pro-nuclear at all. It's not really anti-nuclear either. However, it handles the subject of nukes very, very poorly. And in a way, I think that within the world, you could argue that it's very much not pro-nuclear at all. But considering the fact of how he views politics in conjunction with media, that is not something I don't think he'd ever be willing to entertain in terms of a discussion.
And it caused me to reevaluate my broken connections to the media that I love. I was in a really dark place, and Godzilla became deeply tied into that for me, and I wasn't sure if I could possibly talk about one of my favourite topics ever again. But now, I'm on antidepressants, baby!
If you've got some sugar for me, sugar daddy, bring it home.
considering the rest of the content on his channel, I'm not sure if this may be kind of real. I'm not sure. This sounds real offensive to some people who may take this the wrong way. I'm not sure, but I don't know. Talking about something being real bad and then just being like, I'm on antidepressants, let's make a skit out of it. I don't know. Just feels weird, especially coming from a channel like this. I don't know.
When it comes to Godzilla, there is something of a shadow that hangs over the series. The one thing that fans all seem to agree is the worst thing to ever happen to the franchise. A failure in the eyes of the world. A crime committed against the very art of cinema itself. The only reason that my wife left me. Roland Emmerich and Dean Devlin's seminal classic, Godzilla.
No. It is like, oh, wow. There's always an issue. I think that people always try to say, yes, a lot of people don't like Godzilla 98. No, it is not something everyone agrees with. I think just taking a step within the fandom makes people realize the fact that no, Godzilla 98 being disliked is not the only thing that people agree on in the fandom. There is a bunch of other things that you could probably bring up that a lot of people don't like. And Godzilla 98 hate is not one of them. There, like, no other film has specific groups just dedicated to only Godzilla 98. It's very clear that Godzilla 98 love is indeed apparent within the fandom, and trying to act like it's some underground kind of like Underground Railroad-esque love that people have to have for the series. If it's really weird, and it feels like someone just doesn't do a lot of research when it comes to opinions that a lot of people have.
Released in the summer of 1998, this is, beyond a shadow of a doubt, the most reviled movie in the Godzilla canon.
Godzilla's Revenge, Godzilla vs. Hedorah, Godzilla vs. Megalon, Final Wars is still something people really don't like. Raids again is something a lot of people don't like, especially now that it's become way more widely available. I don't know. A lot of people don't like it, but wildly reviled, no. Let's stop. And I think the fact that my last stream kind of proves the fact that, it's not that wildly reviled by everybody.
People actively hate this. Both diehard fans and casual viewers seem to agree that it's just lousy. Despite being a financial success, making $379 million worldwide.
This is a big 98 talking point. It was financially successful. Just because something does financially successful does not mean that a film is good. If we're going by the argument that a film is good, or at least defensible because it made a whole lot of money, then I would expect a lot of these people to also really be defending the Bayformers films, because those films made a lot more money than anything else. Like, a lot of the Bayformer films outperformed so many better films. Like, without a doubt, the Transformers films probably outdid 1917, probably outdid Whiplash, Black Swan, Nightcrawler, but that does not mean the Bayformer films are better films than any of the ones I just mentioned. Like, this argument needs to stop. And especially a lot of people who are very much like anti-capitalist, like a lot of people nowadays are very much anti-capitalist. So making the capitalist defense of 98 needs to stop, especially if you're anti-capitalist. It feels like you're really trying to get a gotcha and get a win in, and it's bad.
Almost 3 times its $130 million budget, critical reception was extremely negative, with noted critic Roger Ebert releasing an infamously scathing review of it, calling the movie
a cold-hearted mechanistic vision so starved for emotion or wit. The primary audience for Godzilla is children and teenagers, and the filmmakers have given them a sterile exercise when they hunger for dreams.
Then again, I'm not sure why he doesn't bring this up, in the fact that not only did Ebert and Emmerich not have a very good relationship with one another, and the fact that Emmerich also made a parody of him being a braggart and a loudmouth who doesn't listen to anyone else in the film. You really are trying to tell me that Ebert's scathing review probably didn't have anything to do with the fact that, one, he hated genre films, as I've already said, and the fact that Emmerich did make a parody of him in the film. That's, again, it feels weird that he's trying to bring this up.
The film became something of a notable laughingstock, receiving multiple nominations at the Golden Raspberry Awards and the Stinkers Bad Movie Awards, which doesn't necessarily reflect on the actual quality of the movie, but
this is something to keep note of. And anyone at home who is also at home, kind of take notes on this. He's talking about quote unquote actual quality of the film. Actual quality of the film here, folks. Because there's a lot of things he's going to say that are going to kind of go against the idea of quote unquote actual quality of a film. But keep that a note. And as for the critical reception with the raspberries and stinkers, the film, despite doing very well, it did have a very big drop off, which is something that people have been able to document and see. So it does stand to reason that a lot of people who saw the film opening night were probably Godzilla fans, and after they saw what they saw, they just didn't go see it. So
It does say that making fun of it was the popular way to talk about the film at the time. Now, 23 years later, it hasn't really received a critical reappraisal.
no. What are you talking about? Like, do you go on forums or do you talk to anyone in the fandom at all, or even people on people have done articles talking about why Godzilla 98 wasn't as bad as it is. So if you're saying there hasn't been any critical reappraisal, that's outright wrong.
It currently sits at 15% on the Bad for Film Criticism website. The lowest.
So wait. All of these are worse. So Planet Eater, Sea Monster, Cautum, Revenge, Final Wars. So wait, you had just said that like people agree that 98 is still the worst, and that like the fans only agree on this. But a lot of people agree that Revenge is really bad. People agree that Final Wars is really bad. People really revile the anime trilogy, and you bring up Planet Eater. I would love to hear his opinions on why Planet Eater is so much worse. And also a lot of people don't like Sea Monster either. And again, Cautum is still wildly debated about to this day. So again, it feels weird that he's trying to say that like the reception for 98 is so much worse when all the films he just brought up are at just as much bad contention. And if you're going to bring up these films, you're going to probably hopefully explain why. He doesn't, guys, just to let you know.
Rating out of any of the Godzilla movies, and a quick look on Letterboxd shows that people still really dislike it.
So bad. Throw it in a trash can and burn it. Wow. I hate this. Worse than I could have possibly imagined. One of the worst movies I've ever seen, including one of the worst romance subplots in the history of cinema. Nothing about this movie made sense, and it was hard to watch to the end. He should not have come to America.
But is it really that bad?
Oh my goodness. It's really weird that a lot of these people who talk about like fan opinions on things will then try to say that, oh, fan opinions don't matter. Then why do you bring them up as examples? And obviously these people, anytime they do these kinds of bits, they want to show the worst examples of them. But that always just comes off across the fact that, oh, I want to make a joke out of bad fan opinions. So that's what I do instead of trying to engage with the better examples. Because, of course, there's going to be some people who are going to be talking about why the film is as bad as it is. So it's just a practice that I've always found to be kind of weird.
Personally, I don't think so. I actually kind of like this movie, and well, I've made this probably too long video to defend it. Now, if your first instinct here is to tell me why you think I'm wrong and why this movie is bad, well, quite simply, I don't care.
Why? Okay, so if you don't care, then why are you making a defense of the film? Why? If you don't want people to actually like engage with your content in any meaningful way, why are you making a video in defense of it? This is something I've always found weird, especially to people like this. I do not mind that there are people who disagree with me. I think that's important, and regardless of how much I may just like what someone has to say or disagree with me on, I'd rather them say it than just blindly agree with me because, oh, I said it. I want to hear people's side of things, and I want to hear the arguments people are making so I can assess whether what I'm saying is of either good quality or I'm speaking in good faith. I think that's important, and it's important for discourse, especially media discourse, and especially someone who's very tied to believing that politics influences media and vice versa, saying, oh, I don't care, while I make an hour-long defense of a film that is often maligned by people, comes across as extremely smug. It's really annoying that people act like this.
It's just a movie. Find more important things to get upset about.
Yes, the common defense of, oh, it's a movie. You should care about other things, such as every other depressing detail that is going on in our country right now. You should totally care more about that, guys. Well, some people are young and some people just want to be passionate about the media they create. Almost like a lot of people who may want to become the people making these kinds of things in the first place are then also the people who are like acting the way they are acting. I think it's important to encourage this, of course, however, to encourage civility as well. It is I could say malicious, but I've already said malicious before, but it's also irresponsible to act this way, in my opinion. I used to like it more, but now I don't really like the film as much. Yeah, that's fine. Again, you're entitled to like the film. I have nothing against that.
So, since this movie is 23
I
years
just want
old,
to make sure I'm able
things get
to
upset about.
like scroll back, so that's why I did that right there.
So, since this movie is 23 years old now, and a lot of people don't like rewatching it, it's probably a good idea to do a quick recap of what happens in it, just so that we're all working with the same framework. And who better to recap this movie than someone who was actually there? Yes, that's right, everyone. I have here Godzilla himself.
Hey, yo, I'm Godzilla over here.
Thank you so much for being here.
Okay, they were going to the bit, and it's weird that people will always need to then state, "Oh, hey, for all of you who don't know," or "Oh, some people don't want to watch the movie again." I think if people are this tied into the conversation, the least they can do is rewatch the movie. Like, I rewatch it enough so I can be up to date on what I feel about certain aspects of the film. Not to mention the fact that it's interesting that he's using the Godzilla '98 puppet, but he didn't use any '98 music, and he just used the basic Godzilla theme. That's just a funny little detail. It's not bad, it's not good, but man, that's funny. That's real funny to bring up, is that he's using the Godzilla theme for the Japanese Godzilla, but not any of the US music here.
Ah, don't sweat it. It's a pleasure.
So, if you don't mind, why don't you tell the people watching what happened in the movie?
Well, I don't really remember the movie too good.
You don't?
I don't know, it was a pretty good time. Got to work with Matthew Broderick. He was real nice. Have you seen him in Inspector Gadget? Just saw it the other day. He sure is good in it.
Well, this was a futile bit.
Yeah, you trying to justify your weird eBay impulse purchases? Something?
Being this meta is not. Maybe it's funny to some people, but honestly, if he'd actually just kind of just went into the bit, that's what I would have rather preferred, is to just, hey, actually played off Godzilla as a character. I know that creepy guy who does Chibi Thulu, he kind of plays into the bit really well. That's completely fine. But being this kind of meta, or like, oh, her, you know how really stupid these kinds of bits are? I'm going to play it off for that kind of meta, whoopsie kind of comedy. It just comes off as just really, I don't know, it just comes off as really bad. Just play off the bit, man. You probably could have made some good jokes out of it.
Okay, that's enough out of the puppet. I'll recap the movie. The movie's opening credits take place over French nuclear tests in French Polynesia, where we see a nest of iguanas exposed to the radiation. The movie's...
Those weren't actually, those are, no, not all of that's from actual tests from French Polynesia. Some of that's just the actual original Bikini Atoll test too. But small detail.
Starts for real with a Japanese fishing vessel getting destroyed by a mysterious force. With radiation. The movie starts for real with a Japanese...
Those Japanese. No, or not to mention the fact that they also mention where they're at, and the people all speak Japanese. Like, it's really weird that I think the issue he's bringing up here, this is me inferring, I believe he's bringing this up because he's trying to say America's stereotyping Japanese people. But outside of this, it's not like there isn't an issue with this. What about this is wrong?
Japanese fishing vessel getting destroyed by a mysterious force. We then meet Dr. Nico Nictotopoulos, played by Matthew Broderick, as he studies earthworms in Chernobyl, which are significantly larger than regular earthworms. He gets suddenly picked up by the US State Department. Meanwhile, a mysterious Frenchman, played by Jean Reno, interviews the only survivor of the destroyed ship. This old man, in a traumatized state, only says one word when prompted by this enormous lighter.
What did you see, old man? Gojira. Gojira.
Nick has been taken to investigate a path of giant footprints through Panama and Jamaica. No one can pronounce his name.
Dr. Nico Topopoulos.
It's the Topoulos.
Dr. Nico Topopoulos.
It's the Topoulos. Whatever.
How did Mrs. Tadopoulos handle that?
It's the Topoulos.
They follow the path.
Yeah, I've never found that whole bit funny. The Totopoulos joke has never been funny, really.
And find the remainder of the ship. Inspecting it, Nick finds a skin sample. He determines that whatever...
Also, let's think about this for a second. This attack is in Jamaica, and not to mention the fact that, or this is right here, the characters here look more Korean, although they could be Japanese. Sometimes I'm really bad with my characters, but it's still an Asian fishing ship. So, or it could just be an American one. They don't really say, but we've only seen a Japanese fishing ship attacked. So we don't necessarily know if it's a same ship or not, but it's probably not. Even then, probably an Asian ship. Godzilla passed through Panama. No one really brings up the fact that how did no one witness him trudging through Panama, because he's either going to go up the canal or he's cross and land somewhere. So he did not go around South America, which would have been even stupider. But it's really bad. Oh, is it Japanese without a doubt, Toku? Okay, then it's Japanese. So a Japanese ship passed through the Panama Canal and ends up in Jamaica. No, JL's saying it's Korean. I think it's Korean. The characters right here, I believe those are Korean characters. Yeah, those also look like Korean characters as well. There's a lot more circles in Korean characters as opposed to Japanese, katakana, or hiragana, or even kanji for that matter. So that's what I'm saying is Korean. But regardless, an Asian ship ends up in Jamaica after it probably went through the Panama Canal and no one sees where Godzilla is. Yep, thank you, Phoenix, for that. I was right! Huzzah!
The ship must be a creature mutated to massive size by radiation from nuclear testing. Soon the creature surfaces in New York City, causing havoc. This is witnessed by cameraman Victor Animal Pelotti, played by Hank Azaria, and Audrey Timmons, played by Maria Patilla. An aspiring reporter currently stuck working as an assistant for anchorman Charles Kamen, played by Harry Shearer. A real piece of work.
Why don't we talk about it over dinner tonight? Your place.
Mr. Kamen, you're married.
Yes, and you're very beautiful. Have I ever told you that before?
Mr. Kamen?
Animal has a very close...
Yeah. There's something I'll be bringing up later that's going to have to do with the whole Animal Kamen interaction.
run in capturing footage of the creature.
That's always been a funny bit for me. I will always say I crack myself up whenever I look at that. Not to mention the fact that he also does voice a few Simpsons characters, so I always think of them whenever whenever this scene comes up.
By the time the military and Nick arrive, the creature has somehow mysteriously disappeared. Nick concocts a plan to bring the creature out of hiding. During its initial rampage, it had been targeting fish, so they pile up a mountain of fish to lure it out of hiding.
That's a lot of fish.
No, it's not. If there's anything about, as he calls it, actual quality of a film, humor without a doubt is probably one of the most subjective things. And considering the fact that if we're going to say, oh, the film's funny, without a doubt, then the film does not take itself seriously at all, which is conflicting with one of the things the Toho wanted when it came to Godzilla. So, no. You cannot make something objective like this and then say, oh, actual quality of a film, brr.
The creature shows up with Nick getting an up-close and personal look, but before too long, the military open fire, and following a chase in which the military blow up both the Flatiron and Chrysler buildings, the creature escapes. Taking a blood sample, Nick decides to run pregnancy tests. As he purchases the testing kits, he runs into Audrey, who just so happens to be his ex. The tests show that the creature reproduces asexually. Not that kind of asexual, though I understand the confusion. Audrey steals a videotape given to the military.
The channel's very much focused on asexual issues. I guess if that makes sense, that's why you're going to bring it up. But no, I don't believe anyone was actually going to get that confused. But I guess that was a good bit on your part.
Team by the French government, giving information on the monster's origins and featuring the old man saying Gojira from earlier. As Nick tries to convince the military that they need to be looking for the creature's offspring, the tape appears on TV with Kamen hogging the byline and naming the creature Godzilla.
And it's Gojira!
Friends who don't
You moron!
Because of this, Nick gets removed from the operation and sets out to leave, but he soon gets picked up by the mysterious Frenchman from earlier, who reveals himself to be Philippe Roche, member of the French Secret Service. They believe Nick about Godzilla's offspring and want to take him with them to deal with the nest. While this is going on, the military try the lot of fish plan again, but this time with even more helicopters, chasing Godzilla to the river, where a submarine fires on him, seemingly ending it. The French strike team track down the nest in Madison Square Garden, and get followed there by Audrey and Animal.
He trashed the garden. Oh, man. Now I'm pissed.
They find over 200 eggs which hatch into vicious little baby Godzillas. After some ripping off Jurassic Park,
It's really interesting that people who even like this film, some people always say, oh, it's without a doubt ripping off Jurassic Park. Then other people will vehemently say it's not. But I will give credit where it's due. Thank you for indeed pointing out the fact that it does rip off Jurassic Park and then not trying to obfuscate it or jump around the fact that it's without a doubt trying to copy Jurassic Park.
wrong floor. The only ones left are Nick, Audrey, Animal, and Philippe. They broadcast video of the baby Godzillas from the garden's media center. The military see it and airstrike the garden, our heroes barely escaping. Then, of course, Godzilla isn't really dead, and since his baby's just...
Is this Godzilla based on off a lizard? Where do his other two toes go? I need to know. Yeah, so he's based on an iguana. Yeah, that's a good point. He has his dewlap claw, so he has 4 claws. He has 4 fingers. What's going on, Kim? How are you doing? Lovely lady, you. How'd the stream go? I'm gonna have to look at it later. I think Kyle, you said Kyle was on a stream, so good for you for getting Kyle on there. But yeah, no, you missed the My Americans Don't Like Shin Godzilla video. We're right now on to In Defense of Godzilla 98.
just got killed, he's angry, and he chases the 4 across Manhattan as they try to escape in a taxicab. They lead him to the Brooklyn Bridge, where he gets tangled up in the cables and shot by missiles, killing him.
Also, hello, Eric. You all are missing everything.
Audrey quits. Philippe gets away with Animal's tape of the proceedings. A happy ending for all. But then, also a sequel sting, because one of the babies survived. Dun dun dun. Okay, so I think that we're all caught up. Let's get into it. Now, I'm not going to pretend like this movie is some kind of masterpiece. That's not the argument I'm trying to make here.
No one's trying to say that unless you say it yourself. I hate it when people do this with any kind of black sheep media. They will say, oh, no, I'm not trying to say it's a masterpiece. No one is coming in making you think that. The only person who will make you think that is if you say it yourself. Stop.
Yeah, because just on the face of it, this movie isn't that. It's not intelligent, it's not deep, and there's a bunch of stuff about it that just plain doesn't land. But it is pretty good.
What do you mean by that? So, again, you can list off the fact that there's things a film doesn't do well, but then still say the film is either objectively an okay film or objectively just not a good film. There's a lot of things where we'll try to like hike our bets or post hoc change something and rationalize, oh, well, I may not think everything about this film is amazing, but I still like it. I don't care if you like a film or if you don't. I want to hear the arguments that you are actually making, especially in a film called In Defense of Godzilla 98.
It's an enjoyable time with likable characters and some well-executed action scenes.
Why are they likable? Why is everything well executed?
In short, it's a simple action blockbuster that delivers most of what you'd want out of one. It's also exceedingly dumb.
Whoa! This is where the Knicks like get showered and everything.
In the previously mentioned Roger Ebert review, there was a section that particularly caught my attention.
One must carefully repress intelligent thought while watching such a film. The movie makes no sense at all, except as a careless pastiche of its betters. And yes, the Japanese Godzilla movies are, in their way, better, if only because they embrace dread instead of condescending to it. You have to absorb such a film, not consider it. But my brain rebelled and insisted on applying logic where it was not welcome.
So, to esteemed and respected film critic Roger Ebert, the problem was that he was unable to watch the movie without applying logic to it. He goes on to point out the kind of stuff that everyone pulls this film apart. How come Godzilla can fit into a subway tunnel but not the Park Avenue tunnel when...
Okay, so he's bringing up things. I'm not sure why he's not bringing up like the full context of this, because there's obviously stuff above here. Why then, when the heroes hide inside the Park Avenue tunnel, is this tunnel too small for Godzilla to enter, even though it is larger than a subway tunnel? Why does Godzilla just snort some flames? Well, actually, I can actually answer this pretty easily. Godzilla can't actually shoot fire. He's going to need something else to ignite his gas for him to actually shoot fire. A better argument would be, why doesn't Godzilla just burrow into the tunnel himself? We've seen him make bigger tunnels, so clearly he is able to do this.
That's bigger. Shouldn't Nick have been told he was going to study a giant foot...
In the circular, it is circular saucer. And Godzilla, the worm expert, is standing in a deep depression, and the camera pulls up to reveal that he is standing in front of it, which he would have already known.
Before he is literally standing in it.
Not necessarily. Once again, I'm going to have to defend 98 on this. You're seeing a giant depression. You're not going to know without a doubt that it's a footprint. It could have just been an impact crater of something of some kind. There's no way Nick could have known without a shadow of a doubt that that's what it was.
The MetLife building should have collapsed if Godzilla walked through it like that and left a big hole in it.
Yeah, that's a pretty good argument here. Of course, we just want a good visual. And if anything, you could still have a pretty impressive visual of a destroyed building, but still have a lot of it collapsing.
Also, he makes a pretty lazy dick joke.
You would think that if a 300-foot monster were male, that would be hard to miss. But never mind.
You can't really criticize him for having a lazy dick joke when he made a lazy asexual joke. I'm sorry. If we're going to criticize humor, then you're still on the ripe end of that one there, my good friend.
This, I think, characterizes the wrong approach to watching this movie. Also, just kind of movies in general.
Okay, so again, if for anyone who is indeed keeping notes here, the quote-unquote wrong approach to watching this movie. But just in case, let's back up just a tiny bit.
I think characterizes the wrong approach to watching this movie. Also, just kind of movies in general.
Or movies in general. So, he has actually pulled the very interesting argument, the Willems defense, as we call it. I'm not trying to say this, but I think you're watching movies wrong defense. And I find that interesting because when it comes to anyone who talks about these films, they always say, oh, you're watching movies wrong, or you just don't understand it. However, they also usually have an issue with objectivity. He does not say there's an issue with objectivity here in general, but he does say there's an issue with internal consistency or logic within the film. And I say that is a problem because it shows the fact that anybody who has an argument against this film is not watching the movie correctly. And it's a lot of post hoc rationalization to the fact that he couldn't really defend the film on its own merits or either make any kind of defense for the internal logic being inconsistent. And is just saying, oh, you're watching the movie wrong. And that is a worse crime than just saying, oh, well, this isn't objectively correct. This is actually wrong here because you said this and this and this. The fact that I was actually able to make pretty good defenses for the 98 points that people have said about the film speaks to the fact that I understand the film has some kind of internal logic, unlike Mr. Bradley here. And I think that's a huge issue.
To spend all your time focusing on logical inconsistencies.
Quote unquote logical inconsistencies. And then it's not the fact that they are quote unquote logical inconsistencies. The fact is they are logical inconsistencies. So if we're going to tie this back to the original, because that's the one film that everyone compares to when it comes to 98, if Godzilla was killed by other things besides the oxygen destroyer, after Dr. Yamane said that he'd be impervious to natural weapons, same thing in Godzilla 84, Godzilla is immune to conventional weapons, but then dies to a regular basic missile, then that is a logical inconsistency. They aren't false, they aren't fake. The fact is that films with pretty cut and dry logic or even airtight logic make for better films because you're able to have a through line and understand this is how the world works, and this is why this scene is important because it shows the tension built up because the world obeys its own rules. And it's able to tell a convincing or even emotional story despite that.
In films, seeing things in movies that they decide make no sense because they aren't realistic enough.
No one is really saying they aren't realistic enough. The fact is that we've seen other things happen in the film for them to be logical inconsistencies. The fact that Godzilla is trying to scrape at the tunnel when we know for a fact he can barrel through hundreds of tons of greater rock is inconsistent because it feels like the filmmakers didn't know how to trap the main characters in a logically consistent way. Same thing for, if Godzilla in Godzilla Giant Monsters All Out Attack, if the D3 was able to impact and penetrate Godzilla from the outside, then it would contradict the other times it was used. However, we do realize that Godzilla could be injured from the inside, which is why the D3 drilling out of him is not a logical inconsistency. Same thing with how the fight with Ghidorah works. The fact that we know that Ghidorah could injure Godzilla, therefore leaving him exposed to launch the D3, is why the D3 in that whole sequence has so much tension. There's only a small portion that we can actually hit that's going to be effective. Godzilla is still very much active and is still a threat to contend with, even while another monster is helping them.
But I mean, it's a Godzilla movie.
100%. Yeah, this is such an argument. People who are like this, and it's really interesting that someone who is very much talking about queer issues or asexuality is extremely binary when it comes to logical inconsistency. Either it's something that is without a doubt 100% everything logically through, this could happen in our real world, or oh, it's just silly, turn off your brain. And this is why I think a lot of people who make this argument are being extremely dishonest, because they aren't able to separate logical consistency of a film's logic within itself versus, oh, this could happen in our real world. This is why because I know he's talked about The Last Jedi, people don't like the Force arguments or how things with the Force work, because we've seen within the Star Wars mythos the limitations of the Force and what the Force can and can't do. So then when the Force just does something it shouldn't be able to do, that raises questions. Even if it was tonally consistent or it had an emotional payoff, it doesn't change the fact that the consistency of the film and the universe it is in do not make sense. Honestly, this guy's opinions about the movie, and I don't know, it's just kind of strange in my opinion, because I think it is a good film. Godzilla, and it was actually my first exposure to the series, actually. Again, hey, if that is your first exposure to the series, I have no problem with that. I mean, I myself, my exposure to the series was Godzilla's Revenge. I will never, ever shy away from that. It's the same thing with dinosaurs or giraffes are both well-known animals that are kept in zoos, but also apex predators that evolved to eat predators. And there's no logical consistency. Differences that was a story written on the internet, and that is $1 million movie with professional writers. Yeah, logical inconsistencies in a fan work or even a young writer's work are not as bad as those made by large companies, because these people should be able to see when there's a logical inconsistency. But especially nowadays, it not only feels, it is very apparent that a lot of people just don't care, because they would rather see either a message being told, or they aren't capable of rationalizing the fact that there could be ways where the logic could be restored and maintained while still being satisfying emotionally. It was something that Just Right, Mahler, and Dishonored Wolf had in a stream they did, where Just Right specifically says that if art was 100% logical, then it wouldn't be good art. I don't understand how one could come to that conclusion. For example, if there's someone, let's say hypothetically, it's a robbery film, someone gets robbed, and when the person goes to attack the robber and he hits him with a crowbar to defend his home, it shatters. Not because the crowbar was defective or anything, it just shatters on this guy's skin. And the guy who's defending his home gets knocked out, everything from him gets stolen. We go through an entire film where he's fighting people, all that stuff. But this isn't like some high fantasy or sci-fi world. This is just our regular world. At the end, once the guy's trying to get his stuff back, he fights this robber, and this time he hits him with a crowbar and he hurts this guy. It doesn't disintegrate off his skin. And we could still have the emotional payoff of this guy reclaiming what's his and finally going back to the norm of his everyday life. But it would still be logically inconsistent that the first time he tried using a crowbar to fight off someone who was robbing his house, it just disintegrated for no reason, but only to set up the fact that he was robbed, therefore putting the story into motion or allowing certain aspects of the world to happen. It was interesting because Brandon Sanderson, really good sci-fi writer, he had brought up something that the creators of South Park were talking about in one of his lectures, where whenever you're writing a story, you shouldn't say and then. What you should be saying is and therefore, because it sets up better logic for the events in your story that are going to come. So, for example, Godzilla is impervious to conventional weaponry, and therefore Emiko and Ogata have to go to Dr. Serizawa to use the oxygen destroyer. In Godzilla 98's case, Godzilla has the heroes trapped in the tunnel, and then they escape because they use lights, and not really, and therefore they use lights, because we know for a fact there was other ways for Godzilla to have gotten to our heroes based on the information that we know.
I hate to break it to you, but there aren't actually giant lizards in real life. People just
in this saying, kowtowing these arguments like this also just comes across as him being smug. And of course, he's from the UK. H-Bomber guys from the UK. Just the kind of behavior just seems to overlap, and it just comes across as, oh wow, look at me, I am super, super intelligent because I'm telling people logic doesn't matter in a monster movie. But in this case, it just comes off as smug.
Just seems so unwilling to suspend their disbelief, to just let the movie happen and accept that some things are fine.
Yeah, no, people can suspend their disbelief. A giant radioactive monster isn't going to happen in the real world, but a radioactive giant monster who is impervious to any kind of weapon, who is then, well, impervious to conventional weapons, who is then killed by a conventional weapon, would be breaking the internal logic of the film. So it's not an issue of people can suspend their disbelief. It's a matter where people can suspend their disbelief. They just don't like the logic of a film being contradicted.
Even if they don't necessarily make sense.
Godzilla fits into the subway tunnels because the scenes are better with him in the tunnels, and he doesn't fit into the Park Avenue tunnel because it makes the moment more tense when he can't.
Well, it's not really, that's the thing, is that the scenes may look better in subway tunnels, but you could still also argue the fact that, hey, he's making the tunnels bigger just by moving through them. Clearly the tunnels aren't like all there. They're completely destroyed. So of course he's making room for himself. But with this scene right here, it's not tense because he can't get in. It's meaningless because we know he's strong enough to break through this. They are just suspending this point so that we can feel tension, so it feels artificial.
Nick isn't told what he's studying because pulling back in the big footprint is an interesting reveal.
And yeah, no, that's completely fine. There's really nothing wrong with this scene. And again, I can defend the film in certain aspects without a doubt, but there are other times where it just isn't true.
The MetLife building doesn't collapse because look at how cool it is.
Yeah, you can still have a cool shot, but then still have the destruction be more realistic. There is nothing stopping you from being logically consistent and having cool shots. I'm not sure why someone, especially someone like this, has such a binary issue with this.
In short, it's a movie.
If you approach the movie on its own level and stop trying to take everything so damn literally, then you will have a much better time with it.
And again, the Williams defense, you're watching movies wrong. You can have things that are literal and you can have things that are metaphorical or allegorical. I think any Godzilla fan can understand this. Not all of them are able to always be able to write them all together and create a coherent point about it. But the fact is that we are able to suspend our disbelief, just not necessarily in the way you want it to, because it breaks the arguments that you're making.
I don't agree with Roger Ebert that watching a work of art without questioning what are essentially surface-level faults is repressing intelligent thought.
Oh, one sec. I want to stop on that point right there.
What are essentially surface-level faults is repressing.
Nitpicking isn't intelligent. No. So again, we're gonna go back to the example of them being in the tunnel. It's not really nitpicking. We know Godzilla's strong enough to break through all that concrete. Why isn't he able to break through it now to get to the heroes? A lot of people, I know some people have said, oh, because he's angry, he's not thinking straight. Clearly, even if he wasn't thinking straight, he'd be exerting a lot more force. If we're saying that he's angry, people who are usually angry are getting stronger if they are angry. So therefore, once he sticks his head in there or even just clawed there, wouldn't he be exerting more force because he really wants to get in there? It's not nitpicking when a world's internal logic contradicts itself for emotional moments. And again, just then the emoji thing there, it comes across as smug. Wow. We do accept that scientists and zookeepers do not draft such genetic traits that are clearly predatory for over 100 years. There's a limit. Yeah, again, suspension of disbelief is very, very important. However, internal consistency and logic is very important.
Repressing intelligent thought? It's simply adjusting your expectations in line with the movie you're watching, and embracing that art doesn't have to match up to a certain set of standards of reality to be good.
Okay, now let's do another one. Lightsabers have internal logic to them. They work in a certain way. So let's just say hypothetically that lightsabers could be used like guns. You press a button. It's a button that all lightsabers have. It's the same ignition button, but if you double tapped it, they shoot like lasers. So you could shoot a little lightsaber bolt at someone. That would question so many things. Why weren't people using this before? How did no one bring this up? But wow, it's so cool because someone's using a lightsaber in a totally different way, as if no one had known to do this in the first place. Or for a Last Jedi example, the hyperspace ram is able to decimate ships. Before the Rise of Skywalker came out, we did not know this was going to be a 1 in a million shot that you could probably never do again. So we're going off the logic of the film itself and not using external material, because a lot of people like this don't like it when you use external materials. So if the hyperspace ram is this effective, why has no one ever used hyperspace tech before as weapons? It's able to decimate entire fleets. So why don't people strap them to asteroids, even other ships, or use them as suicide maneuvers. Like, the fact is that the CIS composed primarily of droids and a few alien but non-droid commanders. Why did none of those that have hyperdrives ever just try to hyperram into the GAR? Because that would decimate so much of their forces because they need air to survive. Just something to keep note of.
It's just an incredibly boring way to engage with the text.
Again, if we're going to discuss the actual quality of a film, then we need to discuss the internal logic that a film possesses, and the Willem's defense isn't going to work.
Honestly,
the other perceived flaw that people tend to focus on when they talk about this movie is the visual effects, specifically in relation to Godzilla. It is safe to say that looking at this 23 years later, the effects have aged somewhat poorly.
Again, there's nothing wrong with films aging poorly. That just means that, well, for films that get older tend to look worse. But hey, for their time, they may be good, they may be bad. That's something we all need to accept. I don't think it's ever fair to argue between older and newer movies that the effects are bad because a movie came out later or a movie came out at a certain point. Doesn't work. The only time I consider it to be fair is if a film that comes out later is looking worse than a film that came out before it, and it either has a greater budget or is using more easier to use technology. So, for example, if Jurassic World looked tremendously worse than the first Jurassic Park movie, which in some ways it does, then I could say that that is an objective flaw with the film. It feels as though they aren't trying as much. But in 98's case, comparing it to other films at the time, especially ones done by studios who would have been working on Godzilla, it looks a lot worse. Jurassic Park and Lost World especially, because we already know that they were trying to cash in on some of that JP cash. Those films look astoundingly better than 98 does in a lot of places.
They're not the most convincing, and it rarely feels like Godzilla is actually part of the scene that he's supposed to be in. The same school of nitpicking that views listing things they decide don't make sense as...
And I would say that there are shots that are convincing. A lot of the practical effects look really good.
Criticism views this as an utmost failure of the movie.
No, you're the one attributing it as an utmost failure of the movie. These are issues, indeed, and they add up, making it the film an utter failure in a lot of people's eyes. Saying this is the quote-unquote utmost failure feels as though you're creating a straw man, which a lot of this is.
The effects can't even be convincing, then why should a viewer ever get invested in the movie?
It feels like a persuasive argument at times, because so much of the movie is dependent on Godzilla and the appeal of the visuals of it. As visual effects supervisor for the film, Volker Engel stated,
"In this movie, the creature is the centerpiece. We have Matthew Broderick and Jean Reno, and an overall terrific cast, but the movie is still called Godzilla. It is a living, breathing animal. Every piece of destruction had to look like it was done by a real creature. So we knew from the beginning, if we should fail to establish him as a living animal, the whole movie wouldn't work."
That's an interesting line he brings up, that we don't establish him as a living animal, then the film wouldn't work. That is something I want to get back to, but I'm happy that he brought up that line.
That was the single biggest challenge.
It's something where the filmmakers had their work cut out for them from the start. They knew that they would honestly have a hard time bringing this to the screen with the technology available to them at the time. They put a lot of work into making things as convincing as they could. There is a considerable amount of practical effects work added in to do things like crush cars with huge rigs and crumble rubble as Godzilla steps around. The extras of the film add to it by giving their all to show utter terror on seeing a giant creature storm.
Well, we don't know if they gave their all, but yes, the extras do a good job, and a lot of the practical effects are the things that stand out the most as being very good.
Towards them. Then there's maybe the coolest element of the filmmaking, the miniatures. Most people only ever really bring up the CGI when they talk about this film. But just look at all the miniatures that were built. The craft and the...
Well, it's interesting because, again, it feels like a straw man, because if people said, hey, the miniature work is pretty good, and I wouldn't argue against that. Yes, a lot of the miniature work is pretty good. That's something that the film can be said does well. The miniatures are pretty good.
Skill that went into creating these realistic scale models of New York streets to make the destruction scenes all the more satisfying. This paired with the scale model Godzilla animatronics that they used to achieve certain scenes, including this huge one with a 1/6 scale taxi cab in its mouth. Added on to that, you have the overlooked work of Kurt Connolly, the actor inside the Godzilla suit for several parts of the film.
It's interesting because Kurt Connolly, apparently, when he talked to Haruo Nakajima, he knew there was a lot of things wrong with the film. So it's interesting it brings up Kurt, but yeah, no, again, a lot of his suit work wasn't really used, but A lot of the miniature stuff in the animatronic stuff is good. However, seeing animatronic itself moving out outside of the film itself, they do look pretty bad. But there's a lot of shots where it does do a really good job, however, and I can't take that away from the film.
A lot more physical effects work went into bringing this film to the screen than people tend to credit it with. People also...
Because those aren't flaws of the film, and if you probably asked them or told them to look at it and weren't making a straw man about what people say about the film, then maybe you'd realize that a lot of people don't have an issue with it.
often take issue with another effects-related aspect of the film, the rain. In this film, it is raining nearly constantly. Obviously, this is done for the simple practical reason of it makes it easier to make it look like Godzilla is there by obscuring him. A technique that it might be worth pointing out that we still use sometimes.
Yeah, that's true. And it just looks better in King of the Monsters, I will say that. It looked better in Jurassic Park, which was its contemporary.
But this shows that they were aware of the limitations of the technology they had and were working around it.
Just because someone is aware of its limitations does not therefore also mean that they were able to do so in a convincing way.
Even if it meant creating an inconvenience to those on the set, getting constantly drenched.
I remember Roland Emmerich, the director, saying to me about a week before we were going to shoot, like, so I decided that it's all going to be in the rain to make the creature look great. You're talking about 12 hours a day for 5 months. Every exterior, you're going to be something like, oh, how bad can it be? It was really bad.
However, despite these concerted efforts, it still isn't all that effective a lot of the time. It isn't the worst CGI from around the period, and honestly, I think there are plenty of places where it looks just fine, but it does fall short of being realistic, especially with the hindsight of how much better CGI.
I'm not sure why he needs to bring it up compared to the Monsterverse, just compared to Jurassic Park. Jurassic Park is a contemporary for it, and it would be, in my opinion, a lot more honest to show, hey, the other time there was other films that were doing creatures that were a lot more convincing. Yes, I'm sorry, Phoenix. This is indeed an hour long. We are sitting through all this, and I am pausing through it. This is an EFAP for you. I am sorry. I am truly sorry.
CGI has become since. But for me, the question is, does it matter? Why does Godzilla have to look fully convincing?
It is important, especially for an American Godzilla movie, that if it's going to be competing with something like Jurassic Park, it should be on par with. However, in a lot of cases, it is not. That is a big issue.
If I'm already willing to accept that there is a giant lizard creature walking around New York City as the plot, then it's an easy matter to suspend my disbelief that the lizard is there.
That's another thing. Why are you saying that, oh, well, because it's a big lizard, therefore the CGI isn't bad? I thought we were discussing the actual quality of a film, and therefore the visuals are indeed an actual quality matter of the film. Also, just real quick, it looks like the obscured face of Tahu or Motunui during the old Bionicle stuff. Just doesn't it look like eyes? Don't they? Please tell me I'm not the only one who thinks that. Or I'm the only person here who's was big into Bionicles back in the day. Please tell me.
Even if he doesn't always look like it. Now, an individual's mileage may vary on this, and I can see it being something of a deal breaker for a lot of people watching, but it just honestly doesn't bother me.
If it doesn't bother you, that doesn't matter. It's still a actual quality portion of the film. Just because things don't bother people doesn't mean they shouldn't be discussed. The CGI for Godzilla 2000, him swimming, doesn't bother me. It doesn't change the fact that CGI still looks bad. Why is this such an issue for people?
Godzilla is a franchise built on not especially convincing special effects sequences.
The point that I don't know why you're bringing up the 54 film. The fact is that they weren't trying to be not convincing. They were trying to be convincing. Just say, hey, I never found the Godzilla effects to be convincing. The issue is that because you built up good faith about being a Godzilla fan, if you say, I never found the Godzilla film's effects to ever be convincing, I believe, in my opinion, it feels like he's not saying that directly, because that's going to break down some of the goodwill within the optics of this point that he's making.
So this is honestly just par for the course. So yeah.
And no, we shouldn't excuse mediocrity. I think the fact, why would people ever excuse mediocrity? I wouldn't want to say, hey, something may look bad, but I like it, so don't change it, don't improve. No, I can like something and still say, hey, I still liked what was done here, but you can do better. This still looks kind of unconvincing.
Yes. I do think that a lot of people's critiques of this movie do essentially come down to a way of approaching media that is uninterested in actually engaging with it.
So you're saying that people are watching movies wrong, and you built up a ton of straw man arguments to show this. I don't understand why anyone would take what is being said here seriously if this is the defense that he's making for the film. It comes across as really dishonest, and a lot of people who defend this film use a similar argumentation for it. If you stop at, I like it, that's that, there isn't really much else I want to say on the matter, fine, sure. I don't mind that. Your taste is your taste. But don't try to say there's actual quality of the film as he put it a while back, but then make these arguments. They're really bad.
Instead, choosing to allow nitpicks to dominate their experience. If they were simply willing to look past these things that truly do not matter, then maybe they would have a better time watching it.
I would love for him to tell people who work in visual effects that, hey, you could do a good job, or really, you could do any job, really, for that matter. It's not going to matter because people aren't going to care. And the reason why he's going to say that people don't care is because he doesn't care. And I would say that specifically, the discussion I had with Braden shows that, hey, in a lot of cases, I don't sometimes care about the visuals myself. There's a lot of things I liked or thought were pretty good visually in King of the Monsters or in Godzilla vs. Kong. But when looking at them through a more objective lens or really critically examining them, some of those shots aren't as good as I thought they were. And that is completely fine because it shows that these films can do better.
On the face of it, this might sound like I'm saying that the only way to enjoy this movie is...
Don't think about it too hard, too hard. Don't think about it too hard, too hard.
But I'm not.
Well, again, you're making another straw man. What you are saying is that effects don't matter in the quote-unquote actual quality of a film. Internal consistency does not matter in the actual quality of a film. And for people who are tuning in who don't know why I keep saying this line, it's because this was something he said early in the film. The people are ignoring the actual quality of the film.
That isn't how we do things here at David J. Bradley Incorporated. What I'm saying is that if the only stuff you focus on when you're watching a movie is these unimportant surface-level things, then you're missing out on actually engaging meaningfully with the text.
Well, it's not just text. It's not just a book. Visuals do matter in a visual medium like film. I don't... Why?
So, let's engage with Godzilla. A phrase that is often used to describe this movie is the first American Godzilla. This would seem like an apt descriptor. After all, it's the first time that Hollywood had anything to do with this property, isn't it? Except it isn't. Allow me to explain. America actually has a more complicated relationship with Godzilla than you might be aware of if you are just a casual observer. If there's one kind of observer I'm not, it's casual.
That is yet to be determined. I mean, there's so much that doesn't matter to you. You are kind of watching movies casually, if we're going to coin a phrase, but let's get into it.
The 1998 film is just one part of a long history that dates all the way back to the very beginning, with the true first American Godzilla, Godzilla King of the Monsters.
What?
Ghidorah.
No, that's Godzilla King of the Monsters, the 2019 movie. I want Godzilla King of the Monsters, the 1956 recut of the original 1954 Gojira.
It's horrible, Carl. A creature made of seaweed.
No, we're not there yet.
That isn't even called Godzilla King of the Monsters. I know he's going to bring it up later, but this is something this is a bit that he's going to bring up a couple of times, so just be ready for that.
Neither man nor his machines are able to stop this creature.
There we go. So, throughout the 1950s, America was seeing a wave of cheap schlock monster movies, the works of people like the notorious Ed Wood. Hundreds of these kinds of films are being cranked out every year. At the same time, Toho Studios are trying to launch some of their films internationally, including one of their biggest ever hits, Gojira. At the time, it was pretty rare for a Japanese film to make it over to America, and if it did, then it was only likely to be shown in art house cinemas. And they were trying to see what success they could have by launching a subsidiary in Los Angeles called Toho International. In 1956, they met with a producer called Edmund Goldman, and after some negotiation, he purchased the theatrical and TV rights to Godzilla for $25,000.
It was a very low figure, even at the time. This was Toho's first venture in the US, and they were anxious to get into the American market. They had shown me some advertising materials, and I thought it looked interesting, so I asked them to screen it for me. I made them an offer, and they accepted it rather quickly. I didn't know at the time that Raymond Burr was going to be in it, or that it would be dubbed into English. I just thought it was something we could put subtitles on. It turned out to be a bonanza.
I do think it's interesting that he brings up the fact that Godzilla, that with this film, King Kong is mentioned, the Beast from 20,000 Fathoms isn't mentioned, because in comparison to cheap schlocky monsters, Godzilla is a lot more closer to King Kong or Beast than any of those films. So, and not to mention, he doesn't really bring up either of those films in terms of the impact they had on Godzilla's creation, but it's just weird for the framing.
However, Goldman was perhaps not the right producer for the job. He primarily worked in distributing American films internationally, and actually had very little knowledge of how to sell an international film in the US. So he turned to Harry Ribnick and Richard Kay of Jewel Pictures.
They saw all the possibilities. It was their idea to dub it and to get the services of Raymond Burr.
Soon, under the direction of Terry O'Morse, a number of new sequences starring American actor Raymond Burr, who would later become famous for playing the title role in the long-running series Perry Mason, was shot, and the film was recut to incorporate these scenes and dub in English dialogue over the rest.
It's interesting that people always bring up the fact that Raymond Burr was also Perry Mason, when a lot of people are probably going to know more about that rather than like the inspirations behind Godzilla. This is right here. This is a nitpick, but it feels like it would be a lot more appropriate if we actually added in more aspects of Godzilla in terms of like what was going on at that time, monster movies and all that, instead of talking about, Perry Mason again.
And Godzilla, King of the Monsters, was born.
The result is a flawed work, to say the least. When you get Eiji Tsuburaya's effect sequences, they are still phenomenal and land with as much punch as in the Japanese original. Ishiro Honda's direction in the human portion still works very strongly when the dub doesn't mess it up.
One answer could be that some rare phenomenon of nature allowed this breed of the Jurassic Age to reproduce itself. It is my belief that Godzilla was resurrected due to the repeated experiments of H-bomb.
Oh, I mean, hey, I don't find that at all. I think the film is still a masterpiece, because why are you nitpicking something as simple as bad dubbing? It doesn't matter. You're not engaging with the fact that Dr. Yamane is still bringing down the lowdown of what Godzilla's origins are, which are still important to the film. You are missing out on the actual quality of the film there. Like, again, if we're going to go by his logic, this art, you can't really make any kind of actual critique of the film in any meaningful way.
Was that the best take you got?
Hey, the surface level detail should not matter.
He didn't even pronounce the titular monster correctly. But
why are you nitpicking, bro? You shouldn't be nitpicking.
The new scenes are just so flat, and it never once feels like Raymond Burr is actually present with the rest of the cast. He's always just off to one side, just over there, which is amazing.
Well, it's almost stylistic, because it really shows the fact that you are seeing the film from a different perspective, an American's perspective, as he is put within the film itself. The framework that he has set up about actual quality of the film and things like dubbing, nitpicks, and stuff like that, they don't really matter. So the arguments he's making about King of the Monsters being bad or worse don't really matter in the grand scheme of things, and he's not engaging with the text on a deeper level like he's implying. He's just nitpicking at this point. But that's if we're going by his logic. I think it's without a doubt what he's saying is fair, but he's being inconsistent.
Major failure in the film because he is supposed to be the new focus. The goal of Godzilla King of the Monsters is to target it to an American audience, so the film is significantly cut down to incorporate the around 20 minutes of new scenes added, but even then, it is a whole 18 minutes shorter than the film it is a re-edit of. So, what's missing?
Give you one guess.
Gojira is a staunchly anti-nuclear film. It is a deeply poignant reflection on the scars left by America's attacks on the country, and the continued testing by several countries in areas like Bikini Atoll, which earlier in 1954 had contaminated the Japanese fishing vessel the Daigo Fukuryu Maru with nuclear fallout, and has left the area more radioactive than Chernobyl to this day. As you might imagine, American filmmakers weren't exactly keen to spread the narratives of the atrocities they had perpetrated and were still perpetrating, having their own soldiers walking directly into the path of nuclear explosions just to find out what would happen. This footage is 100% real, and I would recommend Kyle Cochran's video on the Atomic Cafe for more information. So this film reduces all nuclear commentary to a single fleeting mention.
Radioactivity of the creature's footprint shows the existence of strontium-90, a product of the H-bomb. Godzilla was resurrected due to the repeated experiments of H-bomb.
However, again, if we're gonna be like you, the fact is that they still do indeed keep this aspect of the film. They just cut down what is there talking about it. So the idea of this being a film about a monster exposed to radiation is still very much apparent.
And reduces the immediate potency of the tragedy in favor of having Raymond Burr just watching. Under the hands of Americans, the film is turned from a tragic musing on a national trauma to just another monster movie.
And that is what characterizes how Americans view Godzilla, devoid of his original meaning. Just a big, cool lizard. And King of the Monsters was the only version of this film that America knew. Being a pretty major success, grossing $2 million, which, for the limited distribution it had and how incredibly cheaply they bought it from Toho, was absolutely huge. The film would become a staple of TV reruns, making people incredibly familiar with this inferior product with no knowledge of what they were missing out on. The original Japanese version wouldn't become available in the US until 2004, with one minor exception that I'll get to in a bit. This was all they had access to. For America, this was Godzilla.
The next three films in the franchise would receive similar treatment, though to lesser degrees. 1955's Godzilla Raids Again would lose about 4 minutes of total runtime, and add in some stock footage from the first movie to be released in the US in 1959 as...
Wait, and as a stock footage. I'm not sure if he's referring to the stock footage from Godzilla's attack, because that's in both Godzilla Raids Again and Gigantus. There's actually added footage of some stuff from Unknown Island that's added in Gigantus. So that may be something he's just confused on. But again, it's probably a quote-unquote nitpick.
Gigantus the Fire Monster, a name change seemingly made because the producers behind the recut didn't think anyone would want to see a sequel to Godzilla, and if they called it this, then they could trick audiences into thinking it was a whole new monster. It didn't work. The film was a bit of a flop. 1963's King Kong vs. Godzilla would receive an intensive re-edit at the hands of producer John Beck. This was largely because the original cut of the film had a lot of very specific satire of Japanese TV media at the time that it was feared wouldn't translate. So a bunch of the film's most interesting aspects got removed, and these disconnected scenes of an American news anchor added in, and the result is a patchy mess.
Again, how could it be patchy? That's kind of seems like a nitpick, my man. Again, a lot of what he's saying here is pretty fair for the most part, but the framework that he's already built up makes these arguments fall flat.
We forgot to bring candy. You better not smoke it around home.
Bloody hell. Once again, this would be the only version of the film that would be available in English-speaking countries for decades.
In fact, the Japanese version only became available in the UK and the US in 2019 with the Criterion Blu-ray set, where it is relegated to supplementary features on the bonus disc.
Yep, that's a corporate issue, which, let's see if he actually talks about what the issues were.
1964's Mothra
Nope, he does not. Of course not. Because he'll say something and then never qualify.
Vs. Godzilla had very limited changes. A couple of small cuts, one additional superfluous scene of the US military trying to shoot Godzilla with a missile, and a new title of Godzilla vs. the Thing. What's most significant about this film is that the international rights were acquired by producer Henry G. Saperstein, who soon became one of the most important figures in America's history with Godzilla.
Saperstein was familiar with the Godzilla films up to this point, and he had something of a different idea for how Godzilla ought to be portrayed. Up till now, Godzilla in Japan had always been the malevolent force in his movies and holding on to the powerful allegory of the original, but Saperstein thought he should be the hero.
Well, that's also not exactly honest, because especially during King Kong vs. Godzilla, the Japanese cut, Godzilla does not have the same potent nuclear allegory as he does in the original or in 55. Same thing then Godzilla versus Mothra, or Mothra versus Godzilla. The nuclear allegory is not as present there, and in Ghidorah the Three-Headed Monster, still the allegory is not as tight there.
I sat in the audience, and I saw that although they were depicting him as a villain, the audience saw Godzilla as a hero and were cheering for him. That's when I went to Tokyo to talk to Toho about playing him as the hero he was, rather than cloaking it in a metaphorical message.
Well, again, a lot of cases, people like rooting for the monsters in monster movies. Same thing with Frankenstein, something he talks about in his channel, or King Kong, even the Beast of 20,000 Fathoms, which is very much just an animal. People still root for it because people like that in monster movies. I think he's attributing a bit of malice, and especially with his framing about Japanese-American relations to the World Wars, it feels like he's trying to infer something that Saperstein probably did not mean.
I told them that if they did that, Godzilla would become a worldwide phenomenon. Godzilla is the guy in the white hat who comes forth reluctantly to save the day when somebody's messing things up. It's a classic morality play.
Saperstein would enter into a multi-picture deal with Toho, co-financing 3 monster pictures: Frankenstein Conquers the World, War of the Gargantuas, and the one that matters to us here, 1965's Invasion of Astro Monster.
To increase the international appeal of the film, Saperstein would add an American actor to the mix. The episode slightly washed up Nick Adams. The way it worked is that Adams performed his lines in English while the other actors performed in Japanese. So in the Japanese release, Nick Adams is dubbed into Japanese, and in the US release, all of the Japanese actors are dubbed into English, meaning there is no one true dub of the film. In spite of this language barrier on the set, the actors actually have a surprising amount of chemistry together, and it's really charming to watch.
You don't know what you're saying.
Oh, no, I just stated a general fact.
That won't buy groceries.
Oh, true, but it's necessary in everyday life.
You're fighting me. You always agree with the girls.
Also, these two are definitely boyfriends.
Wow, it's not like I haven't heard this joke before a million times. That probably came off a little bit more antagonistic than I probably meant it to be, but I've heard this joke so many times. And I also think Alex the Hunted also did. What is it with these two always getting paired by UK Godzilla fans? I don't know. This feels weird.
Beyond the interesting bilingual production, this film is notable for fully making Godzilla into a hero with no reservations.
Well, I mean, what about Ghidorah the Three-Headed Monster?
No longer was he the force of nature threat and powerful nuclear allegory. Instead, he was Earth's defender and does a Shie dance.
A happy moment.
At this point, Godzilla would only be known as this heroic figure.
Not to mention, the other thing is that if you actually look at some of the finer details about Invasion of Astro Monster, all of these changes weren't ones that Saperstein himself specifically did it. Like, Eiji Tsuburaya wanted the Shie dance. I doubt he would have known what that is, because it's not coming from any kind of American dance or anything like that. So these changes that Saperstein asked for, Toho could have just said no or argued with it a little bit more. But the fact is that they still chose to do this. We can argue all day about whether or not this choice was good, but acting as though this was purely a imposing American putting on these changes that the Japanese were unable to refute is, again, misleading. That because, again, this is what the framing of this video seems to imply.
What Saperstein wanted came to pass. Through the following years of dubs leading up to 1974's The Terror of Mechagodzilla, Godzilla would exist almost solely without his allegorical roots, and would just be the meaningless monster that America had always wanted him to be.
Well, for Godzilla himself, that can be argued. However, there's still meaning to the other films. And painting it like this, without a doubt, feels as though it is trying to downplay the Showa films because of something an American said to therefore prop up what someone else did for an American Godzilla film and how it's good.
After 1974, Toho Studios decided to stop producing Godzilla films as they were no longer successful, but America still saw some potential in the property as they had transformed.
Not to mention the fact that what Saperstein was doing in terms of helping out the films did kind of fall out, not necessarily in a bad way, but clearly they weren't just doing it for his sake. They could have stopped. They weren't like under budget to keep on producing these films like this. So it's not just on like American desire to see more Godzilla films.
From 1977 to 1979, Marvel produced a comic book series where Godzilla interacts with the Avengers, which is pretty wild, but not hugely significant, plus I haven't had time to read it.
I had to. Okay, well, I mean, just if you're making an hour-long video, then do some more time for research. It's not like people were expecting this video to come out at a specific time. I've been collecting a lot of the Marvel Godzilla comics, and although he's not super allegorical, he still retains a lot of what makes the character Godzilla in both appearance, ability, and origin.
But in 1978, legendary animation studio Hanna-Barbera created a Godzilla animated series that aired on NBC for 2 seasons.
The show is a fairly perfect distillation of how far Godzilla got taken from where he began. Here, the crew of the ship, the Calico, would travel the world investigating scientific anomalies, which invariably turned out to be some sort of giant monster. Upon facing this foe, they would use their Godzilla summoning signal to call the King of the Monsters up to do battle. So Godzilla is not only a purely heroic figure, he also has a group of human friends that he works with. I feel like there's something else about the show I'm forgetting to mention too.
Yes, because... Yep, just for that alone. No, none of y'all are hearing this because I hate the fact that people always bring this up. The fact that, oh yes, let's not forget Godzuki, guys. I hate the meta behind some of these videos a lot of the time.
Yeah, Godzuki is Godzilla's cousin, a little himbo dragon with tiny wings who gets into all sorts of scrapes. An element designed exclusively to add extra appeal to the kids watching. The show was chiefly created with kids in mind, and as such, the darker edges of Godzilla were filed off even further. As Joseph Barbera commented,
"The problem with the show was simply this. When they start telling you in standards and practices, don't shoot any flame at anybody, don't step on any buildings or cars, then pretty soon they've taken away all the stuff he represents."
Yeah, it's almost interesting. It's like Americans actually cared about Godzilla, and for some reason it's a lot of other things getting in the way from stopping production from being better. However, unlike these films where there were actual stipulations they had to uphold, Emmerich had none of these stipulations, so anything that's going against what Godzilla normally is were not limitations. They just decided not to do it.
That became the problem. To maintain a feeling of Godzilla and at the same time cut down everything that he did, we managed to get a fair show out of it. It was okay. Godzuki kinda got the kids going. Godzuki.
I did not realize that was a woman who did that, and I think that's probably because she's trying to make fun of the fact that old white guy, but I can't know unless I actually ask the person.
but honestly, in spite of this kidifying of the idea and the limitations they were working with, this show actually slaps.
Why?
I really enjoy it. It's incredibly formulaic and full of really basic one-note characters, but each episode has really good rising action with satisfying...
Wait, good writing and action. Okay. I know someone's been breaking down both Godzilla series, which he's going to talk about later, and this show, so I would love to hear what he has to say about good writing.
Payoffs. It's a well put together action show and I recommend it. Godzilla has so much personality in this show with some great facial expressions and roars performed by Ted Cassidy, who was Lurch in the Addams Family, and very clearly just sounds like a guy roaring into a microphone. Then there's Godzuki, performed by Scooby-Doo himself, Don Messick. He's consistently funny and adorable in his clumsy antics, but just as often helpful and important to the plots of the episode.
He is an absolute delight. I will hear no Godzuki slander on this channel.
Well, you know, if we're talking about the actual quality of a film, again, probably going to have to stop this until we actually get back to 98 itself, but his standards are all over the place.
I love this good boy, and I will defend him with my life.
Boy, Godzuki, you're doing great!
The next first American Godzilla would be Godzilla King of the Monsters.
Security decides to use depth bomb on Godzilla. Oh, that's fine.
No, that's Godzilla King of the Monsters, the 1956 recut of the original 1954 Gojira.
That means it's coming for food, a fight, or something more intimate.
No, that's Godzilla King of the Monsters, the 2019 movie. I want Godzilla King of the Monsters in 3D, the failed 1983 project by Steve Miner. Godzilla would have been attacking San Francisco and would be atomic because of residual energy from the Big Bang, I guess. There's
That's
not
never
too much to
stated.
say about this one here. It never got past the storyboard stage and was ultimately deemed too expensive.
What do you mean from residual energy from the Big Bang? A lot of sources state that Godzilla was radioactive, like naturally, or because of the bombs, and internally he's like a living nuclear reactor. What? Why? What? However, if we're talking about the stipulations Toho actually made to Sony, this Godzilla does fit a lot more than any other, especially more than 98. The only thing that it does worse than 98 is that this film does not really take Godzilla seriously, because there are scenes where Godzilla's fighting planes with objects like swords and stuff. However, the appearance is closer to Godzilla. He is indeed, radioactive. However, both of these Godzillas die at the end, but both of them fail at the same things. However, one does look more like Godzilla and maintains a lot of what he's characterized as a force of nature rather than an animal. So in a lot of ways, Godzilla 3D does, without a doubt, and is more faithful. Like, that goes without saying.
But as the interest in the project was at its peak, the Japanese cut of the original received its first airings in the US in limited theatrical runs in New York and Chicago. So even this movie that never happened had an effect on some of the public's perception of the series. And we're still not up to the 1998 movie yet, because there's one more American project with Godzilla that came first.
In the years following the terror of Mechagodzilla, there have been a few attempts by Toho to restart the series on their end, but none of them came to fruition until 1984, when they made a film simply titled Gojira. You thought there were a lot of films called King of the Monsters? Well, there's even more just called Godzilla. This was a dark, moody, and politically driven film that sought to take Godzilla back to his origins by ignoring all previous sequels. It was a special effects spectacular and the highest budget effects movie in Japan to that date, and it did not perform well domestically. For its inflated budget, it was a downright flop. So, when it came to selling it to the US, it was back to the old tricks of recutting the movie. It was released as The Return of Godzilla in 1985, with scenes drastically rearranged and all new sections shot where they brought back the absolute unit Raymond Burr to reprise his role from the original, which is pretty cool. But his scenes feel somehow even more disconnected than they did in 1956. And
almost like because they're not trying to put him in scenes and he's just in a completely different location. Yeah.
The resulting edit turns what is one of the most interesting and somber Godzilla films into a bit of a dull, incoherent mess. And
have you watched the movie? How is it a dull, incoherent mess? I will say this. I have both films on DVD. I'd say, if anything, the American cut is just slimmer, and a lot of its more somber elements are taken away for a lot of aspects. Like, for example, this character right here, it's funny that he's darkened out here, but this guy is the one guy who makes most of the jokes, as well as he does the Dr. Pepper kind of commercial thing there by taking a like really goofy sip on screen. And Raymond Burr almost always is just disconcerted and upset looking at what this guy's doing. So that's interesting to know, but how is it a mess? Like, why do you just say something but never elaborate on it further?
I could really just go for a refreshing beverage right about now.
Oh, there it is.
From here, America's relationship to Godzilla was largely reduced to the home video market. The movies were generally considered laughable, cheap fare with some spectacularly silly dubs.
But then, dinosaurs and birds are genetically similar.
Why are you nitpicking dubs? It seems like a nitpick.
Oh my god! They were B-movies. A joke with little commercial success outside of the die-hard fans. Over the course of just over 40 years, Godzilla had become a household name, but a laughingstock. And all of that is the context under which Hollywood would create a new Godzilla movie in 1998. Godzilla in America was, in every iteration, intentionally divorced from its meaning.
Okay, so again, for all y'all kids at home, Godzilla was goofy, for one, and divorced from meaning. Okay. That's the first thing he's saying. Godzilla was a joke, and he was divorced from meaning. Just keep those things filed away for later.
The franchise was separated from the allegory that made it, leaving an often tonally confused, hollow shell that they wanted to serve as nothing more than a mindless B-movie entertainment, where even the more serious productions were reduced to run-of-the-mill monster features. But could an American Godzilla be more than that? Could it actually say something?
So the audio for the on-camera stuff in this section just came out really bad, so I'm just going to dub over this bit. Like an old Godzilla movie. Godzilla in the original films is a prehistoric creature awoken from slumber by the testing of nuclear weaponry in the Pacific Ocean. But
well, depending on the age of continuity, mutated, but carry on.
Godzilla 1998 takes a slightly different approach to the origins of the creature. Here, Godzilla is a regular animal.
Probably an iguana, mutated to its enormous size by radiation. The cause of the carnage lies in the same place as the original, but with a different effect to it. Rather than a vengeful force of the earth striking back at us for our actions attacking it, it's a monster of our own making.
Well, Godzilla gets his powers from the H-bomb, so they're both still monsters of their own making. However, unlike the original 98, is still susceptible to conventional weapons, so therefore he's an easily managed weapon of or monster of our own making.
Something where our lack of thought of the consequences created a whole worse problem.
Again, same thing in the 54. However, because of the choices to make Godzilla an animal rather than an actual monster, that effect of being some creature of our own creation and all of that just falls flat.
So in its own unique way, this movie is staying true to what the franchise was always supposed to be about. The continued proliferation of the nuclear arms race and the inevitable consequences that this has had and will continue to have unless we stop it.
Again, yes. On a surface level examination of the text, as you call it, they both do this. However, with both 54 and 84, we realize the fact that the most powerful weapon in existence to us has bred an even stronger, more powerful monster that we cannot deal with so easily. On the other hand, in 898, we are dealing with a creature of our own making, however, a creature that we could still deal with if we are at least competent.
The world cannot take what we are doing to it, and in the fantasy of a Godzilla film, the world can strike back at us for our actions directly.
Well, I mean, for a lot of people who are environmentalists, a lot of catastrophes that we're seeing now as a result of that own action. So, in a way, it's not just fantasy for some in terms of how we view certain things in nature.
The first one is very impressive because it has a good message, pretty much like an ecological message. If we keep doing nuclear testing, that brings bad consequences. Nature strikes back, and Godzilla is a symbol of that. And ours was like a reinterpretation of that movie in modern terms. But that's why we had the opening sequence of the atomic explosions and the lizards. Godzilla stands for nature's revenge, what we have done to this earth.
So if Godzilla is nature's revenge for what we've done to the earth, then why is he so easy to kill? If we're actually dealing with a military that's at least somewhat competent or conducts itself similar to how it does normally, instead of creating a story that narratively needs the military to be incompetent, then nature's revenge isn't as strong as it would be in 84 or 54 or Shin for that matter. And not to mention the fact is that with the quote he's bringing up, Emmerich is kind of being a little too soft with Godzilla. I'm not sure specifically where he's pulling this from, but if we're looking at the history of Godzilla 98 from Sci-Fi Japan, the fact is that how they took Godzilla was very much not how we consider this. I didn't want to do Godzilla, but they made me a deal which was unheard of. Okay, let's go about this real radically. I'm not doing Big Belly Godzilla, I'm doing him as a lizard. That was supposed to tell everybody I can't do this film. This is specifically from the Hollywood Reporter article, and he keeps going on to saying Toho Godzilla, who owns Toho, said, "Oh, we'll call this the new Godzilla, the Hollywood Godzilla. Then we can still do our fat Godzilla." Toho continued to make Godzilla movies with this classic look, while Women's Godzilla was leaner and faster. And I said, shit. Well, the fact is that this is contradicted by something he had said earlier. I told Sony that I would do the film, but on my own terms, with Godzilla as a fast-moving animal out of nature rather than some strange kind of creature. The fact is that he, without a doubt, is trying to move his Godzilla away from the original Godzilla in appearance, but also in what he's supposed to represent. Godzilla 98 is without a doubt an animal. However, he doesn't really do much else besides that. They take very little of the original film and not much else. I think the famous line we all know is, "I didn't want to make the original Godzilla. I wanted nothing to do with it. I wanted to make my own." We took the part of the original film basic storyline in that the creature becomes created by radiation and it becomes a big challenge. But that's all we took. But if it becomes a big challenge, it's not exactly nature's revenge. And really, the only reason Godzilla 98 is a big challenge is because of the fact that the military is portrayed so incompetently, rather than how it would naturally be portrayed, which would therefore actually be more interesting, because if the military is portrayed in a way that is actually somewhat competent, then we do see that, wow, this is actually an issue that needs to be taken seriously. However, that would still be undermined by Godzilla's death on the Brooklyn Bridge, because it still shows that conventional weapons can deal with nature's revenge. So that's the big issue that I have, is when people try to say, oh, well, they're just trying to make him as an animal. It doesn't fit like that when you actually think about it. But carrying on.
The opening sequence is a nuclear test being performed in French Polynesia by the French government. In the 30 years between 1966 and 1996, the French government carried out extensive nuclear testing on the uninhabited atolls Mororora and Fangataufa. The official number of tests carried out is still largely unknown, though estimated at somewhere between 175 and 181. Until 1974, these were atmospheric tests being performed in the open air. According to Greenpeace, the very first of these tests would spread contamination as far as New Zealand and Peru, just under 3,000 miles and just over 4,000 miles respectively. The 41st test, which took place on the 17th of July 1974, took a different trajectory than expected and subjected Tahiti and several surrounding atolls to significant amounts of ionizing radiation, with approximately 110,000 people exposed to it. This is information that was concealed by the French government until independent research was performed by French news website Disclose, researchers from Princeton University, and British firm Interpret over the past 2 years.
So what's actually really interesting about this is that a lot of people like to say that the film is about us taking responsibility for our actions, when in reality, the French behave in a way that is promoting espionage as well as keeping things under wraps because they know more than they actually do know, which he does bring up in this video here. So the argument that we are indeed all of us taking responsibility isn't exactly true when a big portion of the heroes team is actually just trying to cover up their mistakes rather than take actual responsibility for them in a way that would probably demand some kind of national reprisal. However, it's interesting to note of how damaging these effects are, but Godzilla in this film isn't really as destructive as the test that created in this case. And a lot of the proliferation that goes around, such as in New Zealand and Peru, those are actually interesting locations to have shot the film, and they probably would have been a lot more thematically relevant than going to New York. At least with 54 and 84, Godzilla's returning to Japan because of the bombs dropped on Japan. That makes some kind of sense. But 98 going to New York, I mean, no one even mentioned the fact that, oh yeah, hey, the Manhattan Project made the bombs, blah, blah, blah. That would at least be interesting, and that could actually be something in the text that could infer that's why they chose New York. But they chose New York because it was just a big city to have this monster, and not even, I was about to say rampaging, but not even really rampaging.
Later in 1974, after a lot of pressure from protesters, the French government would move their tests to underground shafts. This would prevent the possibility of further incidents from atmospheric dispersion, but came with a whole new issue.
So now in this case, the French, since everything's out in the open, they just keep doing what they've been doing. So once again, France, in the film at least, what they're portrayed as, aren't really still taking responsibility,
The nuclear bombs that they let off in this period were causing cracks in the atolls. There was significant fear that the leftover nuclear material from these detonations would eventually come into contact with the ocean and spread the contamination. So disastrous were these cracks that in one of the tests they carried out, the bomb got stuck halfway down the shaft and caused an entire chunk of an outer slope of the atoll to just break off and fall into the ocean, leading to a tsunami. The tests only really stopped in 1996 because the UN put together the Comprehensive Nuclear Test Ban Treaty, which stopped almost all nuclear testing across the world. Yeah, except not entirely, because it was never actually entered into force, because 8 countries never ratified it. So make no mistake, France entered into force because 8 countries never ratified it.
And the ones who never ratified it: Australia, Brazil, Chile, Finland, Hungary, Japan. Interesting. Well, the fact is that here they want to bring up America. So now you're right. Well, these are the ones that did ratify it. The ones that didn't: India, Pakistan, Iran, US, Israel, Egypt, China, and the Democratic People's Republic of Korea. Okay, that's funny. But again, the point of this specifically.
So make no mistake, France carried out dozens of nuclear tests over a period of 3 decades, covered up the worst of the effects, and would probably still be doing it today if it weren't for the UN doing something about it. By presenting us with this as the opening to our Godzilla movie, and having Nick lay out that Godzilla was mutated by nuclear testing, the movie draws a very clear line to say that the French nuclear tests are responsible for Godzilla.
So the film is better because it actually waggles the finger at a specific group. Again, that would actually not be the point of the original 54 film. They do mention Hiroshima and Nagasaki, but they don't specifically say, well, the Americans, without a doubt, are what caused Godzilla to be created. That was never the point of the anti-nuclear message of the first film. It was just anti-nuclear, this anti-nuclear disarmament, as well as just the stop I'm getting tongue-tied now, and it's been so long. the proliferation of nuclear weapons around the world, because Honda, when he was making this film, believed in the idea of a united humanity rather than pointing the finger and kind of casting an original sin on a nation. That was never the point.
More direct line of political criticism than anything American.
And there it is. It's a matter of political criticism rather than actually looking at whether it's consistent with how Godzilla in the past, especially the first film built by the people who experienced nuclear attacks, felt about these issues.
Had previously attempted in their versions of Godzilla. In fact, even the original Japanese films did not tend to be this explicit. It is a pretty easy mistake to make to look at the politics of the original film, the anti-nuclear message, and think it's only about America's use of the weapons. It's certainly something I've thought and said before. But while the devastating effects of America's attack on Hiroshima and Nagasaki and the Bikini Atoll incident are the most obvious and direct line one can draw, they never actually mention any country by name. America were not the only ones carrying out those tests.
Because it's not just about America, they use American tests because it had to do with something that would also be related to Japan, the Lucky Dragon incident, but it's not condemning America because the film wasn't about creating an original sin allegory for Godzilla. It was just about proliferation of nuclear weapons and showing how that damage affected a nation through the lens of a fun monster movie. People always say, oh, well, the first Godzilla movie is not fun. The fact is that it is still a monster movie, so there is indeed a thing to enjoy about it, even if you are able to think about the somber elements of the film.
And it isn't clear whose nuclear test awoke the creature. Gojira stands in opposition to all uses of nuclear weaponry, but Godzilla 1998 points in a very specific direction. The critique continues through the inclusion of the character of Philippe, a member of the French Secret Service who's working desperately to try and cover up France's involvement in the creation of Godzilla. He hides evidence, bugs the US military briefings, builds up a huge armory of weapons to take out the Godzilla babies.
Then why isn't he portrayed as a villain? The fact is that Godzilla is without a doubt portrayed as a more antagonistic force in the original films. However, there are no, even in King of the Monsters, the American character is not trying to excuse what America was doing. The issue is still very much something that would shock the entire world. Like, even Raymond Burr's line, "Pray, George, pray for the whole world." Like, that's not something that was supposed to be like, hey, look at the original sin you've got there, America. You think about that. It's bad. Also, one thing of note, you see these right here, grenade launchers. So they're probably a lot more effective than the MP5s that the Russian Secret Service guys bring in to go stop the baby Godzillas. They've been way more effective.
How did you get all this stuff into the country?
This is America. You can't buy anything.
And he just can't get a good cup of coffee.
The thing is that if we're going to talk about how like bad what the French did, why is it so important that we need to highlight how America did wrong by Japan? But then the French in this film he'll explain how well they're portrayed here, but why are they not portrayed as villains? Or at least antagonistic?
No croissant? No, monsieur.
They're shown to be efficient, effective, and always looking on with a calculated air. As if...
Well, I mean, France got caught before, so why weren't they caught in this film? If we're gonna delve deep into the text and talk about the actual quality of the film, so I'm bringing that line back, we can't really say that how the French are portrayed here is overall a good one, because that would undermine the allegory as well as the themes you're trying to say the film has.
I have to say, they know more than they are willing to tell, and will not hesitate to use their knowledge to hide the truth, which stands in direct contrast to the film's depiction of the US military. We spend a significant amount of the film's runtime with the military unit that picks up Nick and tries to take down Godzilla. They are one of our primary viewpoints for the events of the film. We have Nick, who is interested in learning about Godzilla, and the military, who are aiming to wipe him out. It's a film where the main character is an environmentalist. He sees the monster as something amazing that ought to be studied. When he has his close encounter with Godzilla at the pile of fish, he is the only one telling the military to stand down. He sees this creature as what it is, a one-of-a-kind living organism that only happened because of cruel and evil actions taken by mankind. But of course, no one listens to the scientists.
What do you mean no one listens to the scientists? As well as, why do this? So, specifically Hicks, allows the use of his plan. Not to mention that Hicks stands up for Nick when I think it was the colonel, I forget what's on his new commanding officer's uniform when Nick gets kicked off the team, but they clearly listen to him. So why are you being this disingenuous about the film you're trying to defend? My goodness. Like, I don't know. Is it because you wanted to have this cheap get vaccinated line here? Because clearly that's not what happens in the film.
And large portions of the movie are spent trying to kill Godzilla and his offspring.
Well, yes, because he's very much a danger to humanity. And the billions in property damage, not to mention the displacement of a lot of people, are what make him a danger to humanity. Well, specifically this humanity, not really nuclear proliferation.
Faced with the problem that mankind created, their only recourse is to destroy what they don't understand.
Well, they understand it pretty well, and I mean, even if they don't understand it, the fact is that although not as antagonistic as the original Godzillas, he is still a giant animal causing hundreds of thousands of dollars in property damage. And its offspring, even though they only attack the people because they smell like fish, who's to say they won't just start attacking people normally once they leave the nest, because they say they're going to be looking for food. So clearly, as Nick stipulates in the film, they will probably just start hunting human and replace them as the dominant species of the planet.
But they're really bad at it. The military are hopelessly incompetent in most of their attempts to take out Godzilla in this film. During their first attempt, after...
That's a lot of fish.
They open fire on him, and he just ducks.
Yep, they do it after they've already alerted him and start using M16s to shoot at him, to which then they start firing tanks, and then they use these missiles, which then causes Godzilla to duck because he's in pain. Instead of using the strongest weapons first to try to deliver a decisive blow, which most militaries do.
They miss and blow up the Flatiron building. Oopsie doodles. Then in their chase, they don't realize that their heat-seeking missiles won't work on the cold-blooded reptile.
And if he's cold-blooded, he should not be able to move this quickly throughout the buildings. I know this is a quote-unquote nitpick, but if you're trying to make Godzilla more of an animal, then you should be adhering to logic that is more versed in the animal kingdom. And again, if he's pulling away, then speed up or try cutting him off. He's clearly not smashing through buildings, so you should be able to find a through line as to where he's going.
And
those missiles do a nice wide arc to hit that.
That is a negative impact. I repeat, that is a negative impact.
Negative impact, sir.
Negative impact? That's the goddamn Chrysler building we're talking about here.
Not to mention how Godzilla just kind of dopes them and sneaks
Yeah,
out.
in this scene right here, where for some reason they're shooting at something, we don't even really see Godzilla there, and they just start shooting down a hole, and then they're like, I think we got him. And then he appears here. So I've never thought of this scene as tactical because the military is just that stupid.
And the back of them? It's honestly great. The military actually cause far more damage than Godzilla in this movie. If they weren't so trigger-happy and eager to kill without a thought, then the Chrysler building would still be standing. This portrayal of an incompetent military force is aided significantly by the authority figures at the head of it. We have Colonel Hicks, played by Kevin Dunn, and Mayor Ebert, played by Michael Lerner, which is part of a whole weird parody of Siskel and Ebert that the movie is doing. It's silly, adds nothing, and doesn't really have any real payoff, but...
It's almost like Emmerich did that to dunk on people who haven't liked his movies. I'm not sure why you don't bring this up.
Michael Lerner is pretty fun in the role, so whatever.
Back off, Gene.
They are arrogant, overly confident, and will not listen to the experts they hired.
Yes, they do. Stop. The only reason why Hicks stops listening to Nick's plan about the nest is because he thinks Nick, divulged government secrets. And then when Elsie tries to talk to him, he's like, yeah, we'll actually start doing some scanning. He's the one person who listens because he's been on the ground the entire time. The only people who don't listen to him who are in authority roles are, one, the mayor, who is built up to be an arrogant loser, and the military, who hasn't been on the ground this entire time. Not to mention the fact that O'Neill tells Nick to, hey, do this so we can actually get a clear shot, because they are actually understanding Godzilla at this point for some reason, because they now need to be competent enough to be able to hit Godzilla so the movie can end.
Perhaps the most direct depiction of this is everyone's inability to pronounce Nick's very easy surname.
It's Satopolis. It's Satopolis. It's Satopolis.
Presented with even...
How are you implying this is like a show of their lack of regard for him when they went all the way out to Chernobyl to fetch this man? They put him on this team, and Hicks wants him to get directly to work because they don't want to waste time, because they realize a lot of lives are at stake. This is a straw man. This is a really big straw man. what's it called? The only ones that don't listen are strawmen. Yeah, exactly. I don't get this at all.
Even a slightly foreign-sounding name, these Americans are just completely incapable of pronouncing it.
It's almost like this is playing into a stereotype of Americans that people like yourself like to perpetuate. Yeah, I'm gonna go there and say that because that's what it feels like. Almost everyone who's American says foreign things all the time. Again, it's a lot of things will become apparent later on. I'm going to save my thoughts for later.
So when Nick says that he thinks Godzilla has laid eggs, they don't listen to him.
Hayes does. He says Nick has never let us down before. It's only after this right here, which is when he gets kicked off because they think he divulged government secrets. Why are you making a straw man?
And he gets kicked off the project after their private footage is leaked on the news, with Cayman also unable to pronounce an incredibly easy...
Again, Hayes and the other general guy, they say you showed him the tape because they assumed that he was the one who gave it to them. And not to mention, it's his idea that gets shown on the news. So clearly they're going to think that he did. This is one of the times where the logic in the film makes sense.
Foreign word.
What is this Godzilla?
He's just saying it weird. Why are you nitpicking it here? Is it for a bit? Or are you just being this disingenuous?
Where did he come from? Why is he here?
And it's
Find out in this
Gojira, you
special
moron!
Gee, I wonder if there's some sort of direct comparison to be made between the arrogant, insecure white guy
Yep, there we go.
authority figure who sexually harasses his employees and the military leaders. An
No.
insecure white guy authority figure who sexually harasses his employees.
I want to do that one more time so that we know that what kind of comparison he's trying to make.
And it's
Find out in this
Gojira, you
special
moron!
Gee, I wonder if there's some sort of direct comparison to be made between the arrogant, insecure white guy authority figure who sexually harasses his employees and the military leaders.
So, Cayman sexually harasses his employees versus Hicks specifically wants Nick to work on the team, gets him to work, listens to him, stands up for him until he realizes that maybe Nick might have compromised the mission. And then once Elsie, a woman, tells him to listen to Nick, he decides to relent because she's the one who said it. And not to mention the fact that he also tells Nick that Elsie would be his boss, so clearly he did not give Nick any preferential treatment because he's a man. It's almost like you are pulling and chasing ghosts at this point because you really want it to fit within your framework.
Leaders. The culmination of the movie comes when they finally manage to actually kill Godzilla after trapping him in the Brooklyn Bridge where he's defenseless. They can only get him when he's a sitting duck. The moment...
Almost like the military is just painted really incompetently and is only later proven to be somewhat competent once the film needs Godzilla to die.
...is given a brief piece of pathos as we hear Godzilla's heart slowly stop. But then, seconds later...
Oh god. Oh no.
This...
Oh, wait a second. Wait, that's sexual harassment, guys. We can't be doing that. She just pulled him in. He did not consent to that. Hey, just because he liked it does not mean what she did was right. So, I mean, I'm not sure why you ain't calling that out. But you know what? I will break bread and let him know that if people are trying to say that, oh, well, Godzilla's supposed to be sympathetic when he dies, this reaction does not make us feel sympathy for Godzilla. Even for the audience, no. Like, no.
Oh my. Oh god.
This incredible creature, this whole new species that had no choice in its existence, is brutally shot down.
Well, a creature with no choice in existence, but then decides to cross the Panama Canal or somewhere in Panama, go through Jamaica, then crawl all the way up the eastern seaboard to nest in a location its species isn't endemic to or is never known, to then lay eggs and die, ignoring other places that would have been more suited to it for habitat reasons as well as just ecologically. I know it's nitpicking, but if Roland Emmerich wanted to make Godzilla more realistic and more like an animal, then these are indeed valid criticisms that he has set up for himself.
Down in cold blood, and everyone happily cheers and celebrates. If handled just a little better than it was, this could have been an actually powerful statement. But sadly, Nick, Audrey, Philippe, Animal, everyone outside of the military influence are celebrating too. If someone had some sympathy, some emotion over what happened other than joy, then there could have been a payoff to what the rest of the film built up. But for its faults in delivery on this, I still find it admirable that the film made as much of a statement as it did.
It doesn't make a statement. You've already shown the fact that you've strawmanned almost every other point. Like, Yeah, and the closest thing I mean, for a while, I used to think, oh, maybe 98 could be an example of nuclear proliferation, but it really isn't. It isn't. And the points you've made are either woefully lacking or disingenuous to say the least. Like, wow. The only good point that you made is the fact that Godzilla's being sympathetic is undermined by the end of the movie. That is without a doubt fair. I will break bread with you on that. That is fair. But everything else so far, no.
That it actually said something critical about France's role in nuclear testing and shaping.
How? France is not portrayed as an antagonist in any way. They're shown to be hyper competent, efficient, like spies who are then able to obfuscate the fact that they got away with everything they did when in reality they did not. They were exposed, and although they continue to do what they did, the French in this movie are not portrayed that way. Oh my goodness.
Shady cover-ups. That it was actually willing to depict the US military as incompetent and unwilling to actually think through their problems for most.
Why is that a good thing, though? I mean, I understand, like, for someone who has a video called A Marxist Looking at the Marxist Brothers, that's not the actual title, but it is essentially what the title is. I understand, like, meta, why you would think that's a good thing, but how is that good for the story? Especially because the comparison you make does not line up with what the actual text shows.
Of the runtime. It's honestly more than I can say about US Godzillas that would follow.
In the immediate wake of the 1998 film came Godzilla the series,
an animated sequel series to the movie where the surviving Godzilla baby fights various monsters, with a team comprised of a few characters from the movie, acting nothing like their film counterparts.
We need you! You really gonna let those space monkeys beat you? You're the only one who could stop them from taking over your planet!
This is meant to be Matthew Broderick.
Well, it's not Matthew Broderick, it's Nick Totopoulos.
Seriously? And a couple of new characters, including Randy, who is the worst.
Why?
And I hate him.
Why? What do you mean? Well, I mean, hey, me and Randy share an ethnicity, and Randy is, well, I'm not going to say it, but is that why you hate Randy? Question. I'm obviously not, but why does he hate Randy?
Turkey jerky is pure nutrition.
I had never seen the show before watching it for this video, and I always heard that it was good and that a lot of people prefer it to the movie, and I really don't see it.
The show is overly serious and cynical with...
Wait, you don't like it because it's serious and cynical? Well, one, of course it takes itself a little bit more seriously, but how is it cynical?
Really obnoxious characters.
How are they obnoxious?
Dialogue that is the particular kind of late 90s stilted, everyone is trying to be clever style that just makes it fairly interminable to sit through.
Well, you're going to show up an example right now, but let's see it.
You're insane. I happen to like that in a man.
Is it my imagination, or is this the beginning of a beautiful friendship?
It's your imagination.
Well, it's almost like these characters have chemistry with each other. Not to mention not all of them act like this, so I'm not sure why you're making this as a point. And it's almost like, well, GTS is more closer to Godzilla than 98 is, so therefore you're really doing a lot of work to bring this down.
And I personally find the art style kind of ugly.
Cool. We don't care. It doesn't matter. As you said, it's not a point against the actual quality of the film, or in this case, the TV show.
The show improves as it goes on, and there's definitely some merit to it, but
Ow, what?
Overall, I'm not a fan.
What? Please qualify what you are saying.
It honestly has something of a similar approach to the earlier animated series. Godzilla as an ally to a team of humans. The government-approved organization HEAT, the Humanitarian Ecological Analysis Team. They travel the world and stop all manner of giant creatures, either killing them or imprisoning them in the military facility Monster Island. So here, Godzilla, though still often unpredictable and hard to control, essentially works for the US military. Private Godzilla reporting for duty.
So wait. Because the United States military is indeed helpful in some way, therefore Godzilla is pro-military and he's like a soldier. What? But the other monsters aren't representing countries; they're just ecological disasters.
Sir, because he's American. So I did an American accent. Despite some initial hostility between them in the opening episodes, Heat are soon liaising with the returning Colonel Hicks, who is actually still played by Kevin Dunn, which is neat, to take care of monsters for them. We go straight from the movie portraying the military in this less than flattering light as uncaring, incompetent bullies, to the show where they're pretty cool, actually.
Well, it's almost like at the end of of the New Family 2-parter, he explains the fact that, hey, Godzilla is the one thing stopping every other monster from just destroying the world, and they're going to need the firepower. And Hicks makes the dreadful call, not to mention in my favorite episode, Early Frost, Hicks decides they're going to have to actually assemble the team to deal with Godzilla like they did the last time, because they realize that Godzilla is uncontrollable now, and he's just attacking people, and he's kept on giving a blind eye because he realizes the benefit Godzilla has to helping keep the world safe. Wow. I mean, again, why are you being so vague and disingenuous about it?
You should want what they want and not think about it.
What do they want? To keep the world safe? They aren't even really supporting American interests. Not to mention the fact that in what's the episode called? Actually, I'm gonna look it up real quick because I do know I have the episode thing right here. I just want to be specific. Oh yeah, Where Is Thy Sting? When Hicks finds out about the Saego Scorpion test that they were working on, he finds it to be ridiculous, and he helps out the not to mention the fact that he's defending Godzilla the entire time because he realizes, one, the government made something really bad, and of course, since the series is episodic, we don't really see the fallout of that, which I would have preferred. I think that would have been interesting, but the fact is that the military is not shown to be some homogenous force that all agrees or thinks the same way, and it feels like in this case, you are trying to paint the military as a single entity and encompassing everything. This is really bad. And once again, when someone has something called the Marx Brothers look, well, a Marxist looks at the Marx Brothers, it makes me think something specific, and I'm not trying to infer too much because it's not that hard to, but wow.
In spite of the similarities in premise and structure to the Hanna-Barbera series, there was never any implication in that one of direct military involvement, whereas here they're all over the place, regularly part of the action, important supporting players in huge swathes of the series, normalizing them.
Wait, what do you mean by normalizing them? Are you trying to say that we shouldn't humanize people in the military, or that the military should never ever in any way be humanized?
This show is ostensibly aimed at kids, and the message that it's passing on to them is that it's fine for US government agencies and military to act with impunity across the globe.
What do you mean act with impunity across the globe? It's not like they acted in impunity when they got Site Omega, which was just where they were keeping the monsters. The fact is that there are other countries that do help out deal with mutation threats. Specifically, the one where they're dealing with the giant turtle. I forget which country is opposing Heat in that episode, but clearly, militaries as a whole are not portrayed as a good. And of course, as a kid show, they're not going to go into all the complexities of the military. But clearly, the only reason you have an issue with this is because of your own political bend.
Intervening in any incidents that they see fit. After the night in...
Wait. Explain, please.
98 film was a critical failure, planned sequel films were dropped, and after the end of Toho's Millennium series, Godzilla would go dormant as a franchise, with no new films until 2014, when Legendary Studios and Warner Brothers would launch the Monsterverse, with the fourth movie just titled Godzilla.
If there is any guiding philosophy to the 2014 Godzilla, it is simply, don't be the 1998 film.
But clearly, the 98 film was a big reservation for a lot of people because a lot of news outlets were saying this wasn't going to be like Godzilla 98. So clearly, the bad critical reception that the film had, despite being so well, or doing so well as you said it is in terms of money, was a big hurdle that the film had to overcome.
So Godzilla is far closer to his original style, a powerful force of nature with thighs for days, and he comes up against other giant creatures. Of course, this is a staple part of Godzilla. Kaiju battles is a lot of what the series is about, but I think it actually does an interesting thing in this film. It makes it so we don't have to question Godzilla too much. The 98 film is concerned with Godzilla's presence.
Not really. I mean, again, he's just an animal that we could kill easily. It's only the thematic painting of the United States military's incompetence is he able to run amok.
If his being there is ultimately harmful, and what his creation says about the actions that humanity has taken. But in the 2014 film, He's just a big cool monster there to fight the Mutos, set the worlds to right, and leave. Yes, there are consequences to his appearance. His entrance in Hawaii causes a tsunami, and he wrecks the Golden Gate Bridge on accident, but ultimately, his being there is solely a good thing. He poses no threat to humanity. He is the hero that Henry G. Saperstein always wanted him to be.
Not really. He's very much just touted as a force of nature. And Serizawa makes that perfectly clear. I'm not saying that the writing in this film is perfect, but as a out-and-out good guy is not really the case. He's just wanting to keep the Earth at peace. And throughout the MonsterVerse, although not perfect, it does do this very well. We're showing it's not America's peace that Godzilla is trying to maintain. He's just trying to maintain peace.
That resolves the film of having to spend too much time on the nuclear ties of Godzilla's origins.
So anytime a Godzilla film is made, we have to always talk about Godzilla's nuclear origins. I mean, fair enough, I guess, because Godzilla is a nuclear character. We should always talk about nuclear energy in that way because he was born from a tragedy. But that is, I don't believe that is necessarily what we have to do every time a new Godzilla film is invented. At this point, because of cultural osmosis, Godzilla has become so ingrained within the popular cultural zeitgeist that we don't always need to explain every single time where Godzilla comes from.
That's not to imply the film has nothing to say on nuclear issues. They do actually bring up America's history of nuclear testing in the Pacific, but they put a certain spin on it.
All those nuclear bomb tests in the 50s. Not tests.
They were trying to kill it.
Yeah, I'm not really going to say this is a good thing, necessarily. Not because I argue with like the framing of what he's saying. I think that trying to frame all of the nuclear tests as ways to kill Godzilla doesn't make sense, and from a world building standpoint, and also not to mention it does tie into the fact that it is not necessarily glorifying, but it is putting a better light on nuclear proliferation, which is indeed bad for everyone else. But the way I'm going about it is definitely different from probably what he is thinking based on what we could see from his channel.
So you see, the nuclear tests weren't just a pointless escalation of the most deadly arms race the planet has known that saw thousands forcibly removed from their homes and irradiated islands so badly that they have never recovered. The military were actually acting purposefully and trying to save us from something they perceived as a threat.
Well, I mean, we do know for a fact that Godzilla was attacking ships, so he was indeed some kind of threat. But fair enough.
This is fine. Then the main threat of the movie, the Mutos, feed on nuclear energy and are gathering nuclear weapons to feed their offspring. Gee, I wonder where they might have lifted that element from.
Well, it's almost like the idea of using nuclear energy to feed young is similar to 98, but also the idea of a creature bringing resources to another to feed something that is going to be a bigger threat is something that Godzilla, the John DeMont one with the Griffin, was doing with the probe bats and then the Griffin itself. So let's not act like they took it directly from 98, who didn't take that kind of similar structure from John DeMont's Godzilla, which they were without a doubt knew about.
The military plan to use a nuclear weapon to take out the Mutos, one significantly more powerful than the ones used against Hiroshima and Nagasaki.
Nothing can withstand that blast. Makes the bomb we tried to kill it with in 54 look like a firecracker.
But they capture it and take it to San Francisco, so part of the climax of the movie is the main character Ford trying to stop the bomb before it's too late. But the issue for the soldiers here is never that they were using a nuke, it's that the nuke ended up in a populated area. You see, using a nuclear weapon is still just fine, so long as it isn't Americans who are getting hurt. Then
Well, I mean, they wanted to bring it out to open sea. They were trying to kill other people. Not to mention the fact that it's very clear that we aren't, as the audience, supposed to like that. And Serizawa makes it very clear that this isn't what we should be doing. But yes, be as dishonest and uncharitable to the film as possible.
And the portrayal of the military is far more flattering than in the 98 film.
How? They're essentially a non-entity. They're just men and women in uniform doing their jobs. They're not like, what?
Where there, the military are pompous and incompetent.
You mean Hicks for you is pompous and incompetent.
Here they are on top of things.
Like Stens?
Under pressure and, well, just a little bit cool.
Okay. I mean, they're doing their jobs and trying to save people. What do you expect? Like, are you saying that's a bad thing if people who are in law enforcement are trying to save people, they are portrayed as cool? I mean, I would love, again, I want to go through some hard hypotheticals. I always like doing that with people. So if we were going to have a 9/11 film, would it be bad to portray the law enforcement who are trying to get people out of the damaged World Trade Center buildings as cool as somehow a bad thing because of geopolitical issues or whatnot? Like, is that bad? That would be my question for this person.
One of the film's standout sequences is the squadron halo jumping into San Francisco in the build-up to the climax. This serves the filmmaking purpose of showing us the scale of the creature against the humans, but it also has the intent of being really cool.
Well, it's a cool,
how cool this is.
Well, it's a cool action sequence. The music is very much showing how scary this event is.
Look how brave those guys are, and they get to do this amazing stuff.
And should I join the army?
No, the only person who's thinking that is you because you are distinctly anti-American and anti-military from what it seems. So no, I don't think anyone got the impression that, oh, I want to join the army by doing this because I'm gonna jump off and do halo jumps and save the world from giant monsters. You're being very, very smug and extremely disingenuous.
I feel like I should join the army. I think I'd fit in very well.
I mean, you would fit in pretty much as the actually smug like CO or that one guy who gets out of basic. Then once he's promoted, anytime someone walks by him in the hall, he says, "Address me as sir. Why aren't you saluting?" And then talks to another CO that tell you to do this.
The US military appears in a significant number of Hollywood blockbusters, which makes sense. You're battling against huge otherworldly powers, you need a force that can stand a chance against them. The military is an easy thing to use for that. But when Hollywood uses the military and wants military equipment and accuracy, they make deals with the Department of Defense. In exchange for equipment and fact-checking, the DoD regularly has input on scripts.
Yeah, that's interesting to note because the bomb in 54 that was actually dropped on Bikini Atoll was still stronger than the nuclear warheads that are used in 2014. So there is that. Maybe not all the fact checking was there. So, you know.
They have been known to veto elements of scripts and make additions. Their main concern...
Sure. Do you know where they vetoed points in the script? That would be a very good point to bring up.
Here is making the military look good. Through the significant influence that the actual military has over their own portrayals in media, they have essentially turned Hollywood movies into a huge propaganda machine. Check out Lady Night the Brave's new video about Stargate to unpack more of that. When you see them, they're almost always hyper-competent.
Well, they're not hyper-competent, they're just competent, not to mention the fact they failed throughout most of the film. What are you talking about?
Totally badass, and most importantly, relatable.
So are you saying that people in the military shouldn't be relatable? Like, what is this point? Oh my goodness. How can you be so stupid? Like, I've been trying not to, like, be ad hommy about it, but no, like, you're honestly disingenuous at this point, and you're being, like, overtly stupid. Like, this is ridiculous at this point. If there's one thing I pulled away from this, is that white men in the military, bad. We shouldn't actually humanize soldiers on film because they're part of the military.
Cool and fun and always doing the right thing.
No, they're not. It's very clear they're not.
Extends as far as Disney and Marvel Studios doing literal adverts for the US Air Force for the film Captain Marvel.
Implying that anybody, like, that we therefore, just because we liked 2014, we're also going to like the fact of what they did in Captain Marvel. Like, I have no desire to watch Captain Marvel, but wow.
The Halo jump and all other instances of the military in this film are just adverts, hidden as cool action scenes.
This carries on to varying degrees through the rest of the MonsterVerse films. Obviously, Kong Skull Island is focused on a military unit, but that's not Godzilla, so we don't have time. We have to move straight on to Godzilla, King of the Monsters.
Oh, stop.
No,
I know this was coming, but I hate
Godzilla,
this.
King of the
Stop
Monsters,
the bit. It's not
1956
funny
the original
anymore.
1954 Gojira. I want Godzilla, King of the Monsters, the 2019 movie.
Once again, the film is full of military characters. They take the lead on the action, especially in sequences like Rodan's emergence and the ensuing evacuation. You're expected to see them being heroic.
So yes, no, we should never, soldiers are evil murderers, baby killers, like, or people from, like, Vietnam era. We should never like soldiers. Wow. I never knew. Well, no, I knew this already. Some people can be so exceptionally smug about something that sounds extremely stupid.
and using all their interesting kit and see them as aspirational figures that you could be like if you just went and
No, never be like military people because they're all bad people.
enlisted right after the movie. It's a pervasive and insidious messaging.
Yeah, that's why I think this is why I think he's stupid, because he thinks this is malicious. Clearly, there is a bend here from
that they don't want you to notice is happening as it slowly works on you. Also, this movie has its only Japanese character whose father died in Hiroshima, sacrificed himself by using a nuke.
No, what? No, his father didn't die in Hiroshima. What are you talking about? Now you're just getting things wrong. Oh my goodness. Are you actually stupid? No, you couldn't just do a little bit more research to look at what Awakening was doing. He's the guy who founded Monarch. What? Well, he didn't found, he was part of Monarch. But wow. Oh my goodness. How could you be so, wow.
Nuclear bomb to empower the American heroes to save the day, and I hate it.
It's almost like they are covering up, well, trying to right a wrong that they did because of the US military, and it still ends up being bad because Godzilla would have exploded and caused more damage. The film is not perfect in any means, and I think there's a lot of lines that could have been put in to make the film a lot better and have themes be a little bit more coherent. But wow. Wow.
Also, it says that the Hollow Earth conspiracy theory is real.
Wait, no. Why are you trying to say it's a conspiracy? Because I know exactly what you're doing. Because another video did this where they're trying to say that the Hollow Earth conspiracy for Godzilla vs. Kong and the Monsterverse is like the conspiracy theory of the Hollow Earth for what the Nazis believed in. And since we're living in a fascistic frenzy where Nazis are everywhere, clearly we're talking about the Hollow Earth that the Nazis believed in, not the classic pulpy idea from like the 50s and 60s about hollow worlds filled with prehistoric life, like The Land That Time Forgot, Unknown Island, The Journey to the Center of the Earth. We're talking about Nazi stuff, not pulp fun that people really liked and thought was an interesting sci-fi concept, regardless of its scientific merit. Oh my goodness. Why are you this disingenuous? And like, you are is so insidious. Oh my goodness. Wow.
And bases its entire concept with the kaiju on long disproved science about alpha males.
Oh yeah, that's another thing. Again, if there's a few things I've gotten away from this video, it's the fact that I really hate guys. I hate the military. We should never humanize people in the military. And I know nothing about the films I'm talking about, especially Godzilla.
Just the worst. Then finally, we get to Godzilla vs. Kong, which has significantly less military in it, filling the film with...
Yes, I bet like he was probably cheering when Godzilla just destroyed those aircraft carriers and no one humanized the soldiers who died. I bet. Like at this point, it's probably me being ad hominem malicious, but at this point, considering what he said, I'd say turnaround is fair play.
Far more sci-fi elements than military tech. They use a spaceship to defibrillate King Kong, and it rules. Honestly, beyond some mild critiques of capitalism in a this one capitalist is bad, not the system that produced him kind of way, the film seems kind of terrified of saying anything.
Well, it's not terrified. They just weren't trying to. They just want to make a movie about Godzilla and Kong fighting. Oh my gosh, why is this always the framing people have, especially these kinds of people?
Don't question anything about the world or how we got where we are, just watch the big monkey do a punch. Also, the Hollow Earth is so real that they go visit it. A character so obsessed with conspiracy theories that he won't drink tap water and showers with bleach is proved to be right about the main conspiracy of the film.
Well, it's conspiracy theories fighting capitalists. I thought you'd be happy. I mean, there's probably a lot of conspiracy theories you believe in. Wow, my goodness.
By extension, all his others, and there's still more of the stupid alpha male stuff. But
yeah, again, this dude just hates men. Sorry. It's very clear at this point. He hates men in the military. You should never idolize anyone in the military because they're bad people.
Uh-oh. Mechagodzilla's a Sigma, the rarest type.
So, in the wake of Godzilla 1998, a film that, though flawed in its attempts, is honestly willing to take a stance against...
So if it's flawed, then you can't really argue. Why are you arguing on the merits of a film you find flawed and you very much know nothing about it or are willing to obfuscate facts about the film, and the comparisons you're trying to draw don't make a lot of sense? Why? Why are you behaving this way?
Nuclear weapons and testing, and portray militaries and governments as corrupt and not fit for purpose, we get a series of films that says nuclear bombs are good, actually.
When? Where?
And the military are your cool friends. Maybe you should stop in at that office on the way home and pick up some brochures. I find it
I would love for him to go up to like a recruiter or something and just tell him that.
disappointing that I have rarely seen these elements of any of the American Godzillas discussed, because people are so focused on the superficial details.
Yes, the superficial details that you also criticize other Godzilla films for, as well as Godzilla the series for.
Speaking of which, How about one last superficial detail to wrap things up? There is one thing I have conspicuously neglected to mention about this movie so far. The thing that upsets Godzilla fans more than maybe anything else about this movie. Godzilla himself. Fans of the series notoriously do not like this Godzilla because it doesn't match up to what they think Godzilla should be.
What do you mean? What they think? It's very clear.
In fact, me even calling him Godzilla is something of a contentious point. As far as they are concerned, this is not Godzilla. The most obvious difference is the design, a radical departure from what had come before.
Well, if it's a radical departure, then it's not something fans perceive. It's very clear. You smug prick, I swear to God.
Which we can see from the most accurate renderings possible. These action figures. Godzilla typically is a big lad. He has hips for days, an admirable dad bod, and he gives off an intimidating presence through his sheer size.
I mean, for someone who talks a lot about asexuality, you bring up a lot of very much innuendos in your script.
This is a force of nature that cannot be reckoned with. He'll just destroy everything in his path with no mercy. Godzilla in this movie, though, this boy is slim thick, with his skinny legs and arms and his big jutting out chin. This design by Patrick Totopoulos, why does that surname sound familiar? Gives off a very different impression. He's less immediately powerful, there's more emphasis on speed. It is the least Godzilla-like Godzilla that there has ever been.
Well, I mean, hey, thank you for at least admitting it, but there's also a lot of other details that I've brought up in other streams, like the last one I did, but we're not going to get into that. At least he said it and contradicted himself, because clearly it's not something fans think if you're able to clearly show differences.
God, this is tough on my knees. How does my dad do this? This can seem especially odd when people see a potential design from the early development stages of the film, a few years before Emmerich and Devlin joined the project. Created by effects legend Stan Winston, he looks like, well, Godzilla. But they use this inferior design. Then there's the way he acts, which is also not especially like Godzilla, even though the way Godzilla acts has changed significantly multiple times over the past 67 years.
Okay, sure. You bring up Shin, not Son of Godzilla, Megalon. Yeah, wow. Shin, who acts very much like the 54 Godzilla in a lot of ways, with very minor details that are more plot related than anything that's behavioral or character defining. Oh my goodness.
But never quite like this. Working close to the original idea, Godzilla is meant to be powerful and violent.
Well, I mean, 98 isn't really violent, at least not intentionally. However, usually with violence, a lot of it, especially if we're dealing with human violence, has a kind of direct or indirect kind of bend to it. So then why are we saying, why? What?
Storming through the city and its defenses with seemingly malicious intent, smashing up the buildings like they're...
I mean, clearly the intent is malicious, it's not seemingly.
...an inconvenience in his way. Godzilla in this movie is much more interested in hiding away, only coming out to get the fish to feed its brood. He rarely wrecks much of the city and generally runs around and between the buildings rather than going through them.
So clearly the characterization is different, so therefore it's not perceived by fans to be different. He's very much acting different.
The only time he even shows any aggression is after his babies have all been killed, which is justifiable, I think. He doesn't even have his trademark atomic breath.
The action figure is supposed to have one it can fire out of its mouth, but I guess the eBay seller lost it. He's got one though.
There's also how he handles attacks from the military.
Well, since he doesn't really bring up atomic breath at all, let me just think about this for a second. So, two white guys, because I know this guy cares about that. Two white guys, both who are affected by tragedy, and then dress up in black to fight against criminals. I'm talking about Batman, and I'm also talking about the Punisher. If Batman looked like the Punisher and acted like the Punisher, but had Batman's morals, Batman would not work as a character. And if the Punisher looked like Batman, but he was just doing whatever, he would still be the Punisher, but he would not be Batman because he looks like Batman. Like, there's a lot of things that go into making a character iconic and recognizable to people, and 98 does not meet the bar on many of those. Just because they don't bother you does not mean they are not there. Goku without a Kamehameha is still going to be lacking, especially if Goku got a different attack, like some random energy beam or the Gallic gun, for example. Even if it's superficially so similar to people who don't care, it is still significant because that is indeed a part of his character.
Godzilla usually does not suffer any adverse effects from a head-on military attack.
Yes, because that is important to the fact that he was mutated by the most powerful weapons.
bullets do nothing. He doesn't even feel missiles, and he destroys tanks and planes with impunity. But here, at the first sign of an attack, he ducks and runs. It cracks me up every time. But the helicopters...
Yeah, I mean, because you find it funny and you don't realize the significance of that.
are enough of a threat that he has to run and can only take them out with sneak attacks.
Well, question is, they're using like machine guns that are not going to be more damaging than the missiles that he dodged. So why was he even running away from them? Like, I don't know. And why would he know? How would he know for a fact that the the helicopters are so dangerous that they're actually going to harm him? This doesn't make any sense.
He's taken temporarily out of commission by a torpedo, and
Torpedoes that would have been strong enough to kill him, but somehow dies to missiles.
at the end, he's killed by regular missiles. Far weaker than Godzilla ought to be.
The fan response to this was that it was an act of betrayal. They ruined Godzilla with all these choices. Fans outright rejected this Godzilla, calling him names like Fraudzilla and Crapzilla, before largely settling on a phrase coined by film critic Richard Pusateri in G-Fan magazine, Godzilla in name only, or Gino for short. He was so unlike what they thought Godzilla should be that the only thing he had in common was the name.
This reception was not limited to just the fans either. Toho Studios had their own response to this Godzilla. First, in the best titled movie of all time, Godzilla, Mothra, and King Ghidorah Giant Monsters All Out Attack.
That's such an overused joke. Stop it. No one finds it funny anymore. Yes, the title is crazy.
There's this exchange. Then in 2003, once TriStar Pictures' rights to Godzilla reverted to Toho, they re-trademarked the character as a new creature called Zilla. Do you get it? Because it's like Godzilla, but without the god part? See, it's clever.
I mean, it's on your level of complexity for jokes and comedy if you think it's a joke.
Zilla would later briefly appear in the 50th anniversary film and my least favorite Godzilla movie,
I wonder why.
Godzilla Final Wars. He fights against Godzilla in Sydney and gets promptly destroyed in mere seconds, while Sum 41 plays for some reason.
I'm actually gonna probably take this down just so I don't get copyright strike for this. Yep.
2004 was a weird time for movies, okay?
On first glance, this is kind of funny. Like, they weren't happy with how the movie turned out, so they took a couple of digs at it. But honestly, in hindsight, I just find this kind of petty.
Yeah, not like Ebirah and Hedorah. Hedorah having put Godzilla through the ringer much harder than 98 did, because 98 was Godzilla at the time. And Ebirah and Hedorah both are in the movie a lot less than Zilla was. Kumonga gets flown across the skyline. Even the three-way battle, all the monsters are treated as so much weaker compared to Godzilla, and they play football with Anguirus. If you're calling this petty, then every monster gets disrespected except for Monster X and Mothra. Even Gigan, who is given his old cool edgy design, is still reduced as a bumbling joke who cuts his own head off. Like, are we really going to say, oh, wow, they really didn't like Gigan, they cut his own head off?
Especially considering that Toho signed off on this design before the movie was made.
Well, the executives did, the creatives did not. A lot of creatives were the people who had problems with it. Toho executives have had a long history of signing off on things that aren't exactly the best. Just because people like what Toho did does not mean everything that they did was perfect. Why are we making this comparison? Not to mention the fact that at this point, they had not seen a return on investment and they wanted to get these films out, especially because they kept on stopping films that they were making to see if the American film would be made. That's why there's so many issues with Godzilla vs. Mechagodzilla 2 and later films. Stop being disingenuous or malicious, or just do your research, please.
Not to mention that Toho's actions here would play no small part in enabling the entitled attitude that fans would have when talking about the films that came after.
It's not enabling, especially because of the fact that, considering that there was such a drop-off in ticket sales, even if the film did financially well, there's usually a lot of that argument comes from saying, oh, because of inflation, even though that's not understanding how inflation works for films in terms of how much money they're actually making in a studio in the future when the inflation actually occurs. But regardless, they aren't enabling toxic fans. The fact is that people did not like it. And if Toho wants to do things to please fans, then yeah, disrespecting, quote unquote, disrespecting the monster created by someone who disrespected the property they made isn't petty or enabling. It's just fair play.
Because clearly, if Toho Studios agree with them, then that means they were right to dismiss anything that doesn't meet their specific standard.
Yeah, since again, I'm gonna go back to the fact that he has a thing called Marxist looking at the Marx Brothers. As a Marxist, if we're gonna pull out a bunch of things that you probably don't agree with, are we really gonna say, well, you're a Marxist, so don't you agree with these things? Like, do we need Toho to specifically say these things specifically? And who's to say you're not going to then say, well, they're only saying it because of this, 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 and this, which is why you don't apologize for a lot of things, guys, because of things like mentalities like this.
All of this raises a question to me, though. Is this a bad thing? Does it actually make the movie worse that Godzilla isn't like how Godzilla had previously been interpreted? I would say no.
Why?
Actually, it's a big part of what makes the movie interesting. You see, Roland Emmerich was not approaching this movie as a fan of Godzilla. In fact, he seems to have had a pretty low opinion of the franchise.
I was never a big Godzilla fan.
I'm glad that he's at least not trying to obfuscate the fact that Emmerich hated Godzilla, because so many people who are fans of the 98 movie try to do this. It feels weird, and it feels like revisionist history.
Just the weekend matinees you saw as a kid, like Hercules films and the really bad Italian westerns. You'd go with all your friends and just laugh.
And Dean Devlin would say this about getting Emmerich on board despite his disinterest in the series.
I think part of the biggest problem was that I pushed Roland into doing the movie because I was a huge Godzilla fan.
It's interesting that you say that. It is very, very interesting that you say that. Because if we look at other things that Dean Devlin has said, he wasn't a Godzilla fan. I think this is him post hoc saying that, especially because that was back in 2018. This is something he had said a while back, but the reason for not doing Godzilla was obvious to Dean Devlin. Both of us thought it was a dopey idea the first time we talked, he recounted. When Chris came back to us, we still thought it was a dopey idea. So, no, it very is clear that they were not Godzilla fans. And then another part, downplaying Emmerich's criticism, Devlin told the press that we're huge Godzilla fans. So, again, a lot of 98 fans love this revisionist history of Dean Devlin as the fan and Emmerich as the guy who either did not care too much for Godzilla or was somewhat sentimental when using clips such as, oh, he didn't realize how good 54 was. That doesn't change the fact that he had a low opinion and did not like the franchise really at all. Absolutely ridiculous. Monstros, good for you that you love this film. That doesn't really change the issues that there are with the film.
I grew up with Godzilla, and it wasn't something that Roland had grown up with. He didn't have a giant passion about Godzilla. He was able to find a story with me that he could get passionate about, and he was passionate about the movie we made, but this was his take on it as opposed to honouring the Godzilla legacy in a way that would make the people who loved Godzilla happy.
So he and Dean Devlin approached the film from a different point of view, one that had no concern with doing Godzilla the way fans wanted. They traded Godzilla's near-mythic, all-powerful status for an animal that was just trying to survive and feel.
And if you're treating him as an animal, then therefore that downplays the fact that he is nature's vengeance. So therefore he can't be nature's vengeance if he's just an animal trying to survive who's being pursued by a thematically incompetent military, as you've put it.
Its family. He's only a threat to the people of New York because of his size.
That still makes him a threat and therefore something to be dealt with, especially if this monster is coming all the way from across two oceans to nest here and destroy your home.
Not out of any desire for vengeance. It's man's hubris in the form of the French nuclear testing that has created this creature.
Yeah, creature that under normal circumstances we could deal with easily, but thematically for the movie we are unable to.
And now, when the consequences of their action shows up, their immediate instinct is to kill what they can't understand. Godzilla in this film is an innocent victim, just trying to live.
Not really innocent. Well, innocent in the fact that, so, if we're going to ascribe morality to Godzilla, you're looking at an animal that for some reason, despite all of its genetic programming and its instincts, decides to go to an environment that its species has never been native to nest somewhere, go somewhere it does not know about at all, to then die at the hands of the military. However, if we're also going to say Godzilla is shown some form of intelligence, then there is at least some form of morality we can apply to Godzilla and at least some form of intent. So therefore, Godzilla does indeed to move here and nest here. So therefore, his death isn't something that he had no say in. He chose to go here and he chooses to die here. And if anything, he chooses to therefore still attack Nick, Philippe, Animal, and all them instead of retreating or finding somewhere to hide so he could therefore nest again. although animals do indeed go after things that kill their offspring in a matter of survival, why, especially in a matter of survival, when this animal knows it can be hurt in this environment, it doesn't then try to escape and preserve its own life. It decides to therefore just go and attack something.
It's a senseless tragedy packaged as a mindless blockbuster.
Roland and I made an intellectual idea that was interesting but not compelling film.
How? Again, this seems like someone just up their own ass about the film they made.
We said in real life a lizard is neither evil nor good, it's just a lizard.
Then it's not a tragedy, because therefore we cannot ascribe any morality to the animal, because it is just something that happens.
So what if one got to that size and in its effort to survive, it threatened us but wasn't mad at us? It was just simply doing what it did and it causes this problem for us.
Then we humans are responding to a problem that happened to us, so therefore we can't really cast a moral judgment on this, especially for people who aren't involved in the French nuclear test.
Well, that's interesting, but that's not Godzilla. If you go to the very first movie, Gojira...
Godzilla 98 is a great film, and it's the same thing you do today, reimagining just like Shin and Singular Point. Except the fact is that Shin is a lot more faithful to 54, and Singular Point, although not faithful in terms of origins, is far more faithful in appearance and in themes of a giant creature that is a force of nature that humanity needs to contend with, unlike 98.
It was an evil monster. Movies after that, it was a hero. We didn't choose either.
Once again, I won't pretend that this is perfectly executed. It is a flawed version of this interesting idea. In fact, even Dean Devlin seems to agree that it doesn't fully work out. But I think, as an idea, it is one worth taking seriously. That does make for a better viewing experience if you do view the film that way.
Not really, because if you actually look at the film within itself and the choices it's made, as well as the choices the director made and the reason behind some of its choices, it falls apart.
To go into it not looking for a Godzilla movie as you know it, but as a reimagining of what the concept can even mean. Something that sounds...
If you're so far away from what the concept even means, then you're not really talking about the concept. You're talking about a whole different concept that is adjacent.
Wholly unique to both its Japanese and American counterparts. Honestly, the best way to view this movie is as Godzilla in name only. If you view this creature...
So wait, then how is it bad to call it Godzilla in name only then? Or how is it faithful if it is just Godzilla in name only?
As something wholly new and separate to Godzilla, even if he does share a name with him, then it feels totally different to see him being so doggedly pursued while he just wants to feed his kids and meeting this ignoble end that is immediately celebrated by everyone as a happy occasion. It honestly has more in common with a King Kong movie than a Godzilla one in that aspect.
It's super interesting they bring that up because someone else called G98 Defender made that same comparison, and that just still proves the point that 98 is further from Godzilla and more closer to other monsters than it is to Godzilla. The only reason is because, again, nuclear testing in the name.
It makes it stand as a really unique entry to the franchise, and I just think it's a shame that so many people overlook this because they thought it wasn't Godzilla enough. 1998's Godzilla is a satisfying monster movie if you look at it through the right lens.
So people are watching movies wrong. I thought we were talking about the quotes unquote, and I'm going to use your phrase again, the actual quality of a film instead of using lenses.
If we look beyond people's tendency to only nitpick unimportant details and actually suspend our disbelief enough to engage with the text, then it actually has some stuff to say. How successfully it manages to articulate its messages and politics is certainly up for debate. But that it attempts at all to critique what it does is more than can be said about any of the other American attempts.
Oh my goodness, dude. Oh my gosh. Oh no.
So adding something to this franchise. Previous attempts worked to remove the nuclear themes of the text altogether, and
I would rather you move the why is he important than any other canal. You have to explain that, qualify it. It's better that a lot of any of the Godzilla films where he's a hero move away from the nuclear allegory, because at this point they're just using the character and likeness at that point. Ones that have him as an antagonist and a force of nature still are tied to that. However, if he's a hero, you're moving a little bit more away from that. And there are ways to tie that back to his nuclear roots. Not a lot of films really do that, but it is possible to do that. So, again, I'm not sure the point you're making.
Future attempts have swung right around to positive depictions of nuclear weaponry and military-approved propaganda.
Yes, I'm again, no. You're just stupid. and you have a bias.
So I say, without a hint of irony, this is the most interesting American Godzilla movie politically.
Yes, again, but I don't really care about your politics, especially with after everything you've said.
While many Godzilla fans severely dislike this film for what they perceive as its failures to the franchise and the iconic creature at its center, this film stands as a fascinating part of the legacy of Godzilla.
Again, there's a lot of things we could say are fascinating legacies about a lot of things. It does not make them good.
Especially among the often overlooked American projects. With its reimagined creature and altered focuses, it isn't a Godzilla movie in some ways, but deeply Godzilla in others. I don't honestly expect to have changed your mind here. I think most people will still look at this movie as a joke and an embarrassment, not worth the time that I have devoted to it. But I at least hope that I've given you something to think about.
I have. It has given me a lot to think about. It shows how disingenuous people will be about things they like because they'd rather have a in defense of rather than actually critically looking at the issues people have with something and just assume, majority bad, military white men bad,
Because that's always worth it.
Canal, you just said so. Ignoring a lot of problems and therefore making a different story is therefore good.
So while I was watching the Hanna-Barbera cartoon, I found these amazing old Cartoon Network ad bumpers. They truly have to be seen to be believed.
We will return to the only guy with bigger feet than Shaquille O'Neal, Godzilla, slamming and jamming on Cartoon Network. Remember, Godzilla is a good guy. Don't be frightened by his monstrous appearance. He loves you. He told me so.
Godzilla, the horrible lizard from the sea, will return on the Cartoon Network. Look out, he's gonna eat you!
Godzilla, king of all
Yeah, I think this is just
shall return.
at the end
He's
here.
going to stuff his face with Smurfs.
I would just like to thank my patrons for indulging me in making far too long videos about a Godzilla movie no one likes. This video was a reward for meeting a
Yike.
Patreon goal, so it literally wouldn't exist without them.
That's it. Wow, that's a yike. Wow, that was the worst video I've ever seen on 98. I respect anyone who's ever just said, in my opinion, I like this more, so much more now. Oh my goodness. Wow. That's so bad. I'm just gonna go back to this. Wow. Again, Canal, you're gonna have to qualify that, buddy. I will wait for a little bit for you to qualify that. And if you don't qualify that, I'll just say come in the chat. You can debate me on the issue if that's what you're feeling for. But yeah. The last thing we're probably gonna be doing for the night is probably just going over some of the Terror of Humasaur demo, since I said I was gonna bring that up, and I just realized an hour-long film has become 3 hours of a stream for me. That's what we do here. Well, that was an hour-long rambling piece of nonsense that made no points and had no real arguments. Yeah, no, that's exactly what it did. That is insane. That is absolutely insane. Oh my goodness. Oh, wow. But that was the last video I was going to do for the night. What I am going to do right now quickly is I'm going to get the game set up. I'm also going to lower the volume because I know it does sound really like loud on my own speakers, and I don't want to don't want to have anyone be adjusting their audio too much for those streams. So this is going to give me a moment, okay? Just yike. But how's everybody doing so far after going through that nonsense with me? Just, wow. The yike to the nth degree. I was getting loaded. How's it going, Zim? It is going good, Kaimo, unless you want me to call you by your real name in front of the fans, if you want to break the illusion there. Were you here for the entire video, my dude, or was it did you just come in right now? Oh, no, that was more than an hour, man. And you're no, Toku. You're not getting that hour back. No, sir. No, sir. It was in pain. I'm sorry, Phoenix. Oh boy. And for the 8/12 people, because I think it peaked at 12, but for all of you who were watching that with me, you have my utmost respect for sticking through that all like troopers. Okay. So the game's loading in right now. Everything looks fine right now. I was here at the beginning and then went to my grandma's for dinner, so I saw a little bit of the Shin discussion. Okay. Yeah, so I need to lower the volume here. Music. Me. Okay. All right, so let me just tab back in here. No. There we go. Oh, is it not letting me? Is it really not letting me actually go back into my other thing? Oh, there it is. Okay, good. Just been a little. Don't worry. The kfab has been broken. I'm sorry, Carl. Yes, let me show the screen. Share audio. Gonna stream Inception for a little bit. Let's see. How's this working? I'll make sure if we could see this. There we go. So, yep, this is the Terror of Hemasaur demo. The music is by Sean Daly. Obviously, the game by Lauren Lemkel. I really love the actual music. It's super retro, and I love it. So, let's start from monster selection. So, we've got Hemasaur, the Mecha Hemasaur, which is locked. Salamandra. The name sounds like, what's it called? I maybe just saying it wrong, or yeah, Salamandra. It sounds like Salamandra from The Witcher, but and the Sloth Boy, he's not locked. He's locked since it's a demo. And then there's also the Squid Guy too, but looks like these are the only 4 they have so far. But I'm gonna be playing as Salamandra. I played as Hemasaur earlier in the day, so there's that. It's gonna do a new game. 230. So we're in Norway. Welcome back to the debate stage. You're climbing says Hans Pinselkraft. And to my right, we have international fat cat Richie Horderson, the heir to the Plutocorp fortune. I'm actually not going to say too much. I'm just going to let the audio play for itself, kind of. This is very much satire, so I'm not really going to comment too much on this. This is just a fun, silly little thing to start with. Sorry, man, but this is 98 arguments for you. I didn't mean to. You're the Church of the Holy Lizard. The penalty of death to perform a sacred duty, or a sacred duty to save humanity by its own reckless disregard for the planet. Hey yo, you man, he dead. In order to save the human race, he must kill their families, destroy their homes, and inflict terror upon them. That's funny. That's so funny. Would you like to play the tutorial? Highly recommended. I will say this. There's a lot of funny things in the tutorial. I am not going to do this tutorial because I do know how to play. So. Also, I noticed my mouse is still on the screen for some reason in some portions, so I'm sorry about that. Yoink! So this is the game, guys. So you have your basic attacks over here, these are punches, you guys have your kicks that you just yeet people! Yeet! You should see this gory goodness. Yeet! Yeet! And then you can also pick up people and just yay! That's pretty much the game, guys. Choppy for you guys, but I will look at issues on how to fix that. Yeah. Again, as I've said in the original video, it's very similar to the page in a lot of aspects, so just be honest. I'm sorry. What I might do is, if anything, video settings, resolution, full screen. Yeah, that's fine. There we go. I just want to turn that off. Turn that down a little bit too, as well, for you guys. But the game is really fun. It's super satisfying. So you have just your basic punches, you have your kicks. You also have your eat attack here, and that's sort of your way to regain your health and stuff. So that's what I really love about this. You can barely hear me over the audio. Oh, let me see. How about that now? It's at 10% right there. Anyone in chat, just let me know if a video is, if you still can't hear me. I might also try to learn the SFX as well. How about that? That's probably going to sound a lot better. But yeah, like any Rampage game, you are looking at very much a, basic kind of destroy the city area kind of thing. And onto the side here, you have just basic kinds of goals you need to meet. So I needed to kill a certain amount of humans. Already past that. Right now it's showing how much is left of the city for me to destroy. Thank you, Phoenix. I will say this, I really do love the music. Like, if there's a music that I'm vibing to, I'm always gonna be like, yeah, let's go. And yeah, there's small things like this, like, for example, that fire hydrant. You are still going to need to destroy them if you want things like 100 or close to near 100% destruction. Yay! And if you see pieces like that, that still means they still need to be destroyed. Yay! 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 Come on. There we go. One thing I will say is that certain, for example, let me show you a sec right here. So that's only your grab and you only need your attack from there. But for example, I'll have to show it on a bigger building for a better comparison. But for example, here, you're still kind of moving crossing instead of just riding on top of a building, which kind of sucks because you're not able to have easy, quick traversal over buildings, in my opinion, which I think would work really well if he's able to program it. So small buildings, you can just kind of run across for ease of movement. Well, let me see if this works. Yeah. You really, like, kicks are usually used to interact with physics, because as you can see, I'm not doing any damage to the actual building, which I think this actually works better because you're trying to work with your grabs and stuff. So using the kick may kind of implement that, because I just tried to do a down kick, that didn't work. So you can also kind of change how you're going to be attacking something. Right here. That's another thing, is that if you're up here, you're gonna have to jump up, and if you want to do like a big slam down for a building, you're gonna have to do something like that instead. And you also, right there, this is probably making the whole thing chug. But yes, you can do like those cool little things where you can take cars and stuff and throw them into buildings. Like, there's so many cool little interactions that this game has that you can't not like comment on just how well thought out the destruction mechanics are. I keep wanting this. I remember earlier when I was playing this, I was humming just the music for this because it's really well done. I have to give props off to the guy who did the music for this. I missed. Yay! Yay! There we go. Yay! Yay! And also you have police here that will indeed try to hurt you, which you just eat to get your attack back. Oh, maybe he was right. Maybe just the entire building for 98, it worked because, you know, maybe he just didn't destroy enough. But there we go. It's closer to the 98 building now. You're also able to still climb on and destroy buildings, which is good, especially if you're trying to get like large destruction bonuses. Come here. Yay! Where? Yay! And also, you have this little button right here that you're able to expand out, because actually right now I'm actually playing on a gamepad as opposed to keyboard and mouse because I am not a complete PC elitist. I still love my console brothers. But I have now reached 100%. of city destruction. And I have killed over 259 people. So get over here. Yay! Yay! I also like the fact that there's a little bit of an NES kind of sidestep with the punch. Oh, what's up, back now? And I cut. Yeah, wow. This game cares more about property damage than Godzilla 98. Well, start to continue. Next stage. Hope you know Mellock now. When done correctly as possible, the abilities to topple onto one another for maximum destruction. Stop with one another, target's weak spot on the correct side. Yay! You are weak. Muda! Yeah, if there's one thing this game does really well, it is revel in that destruction. Okay, actually, this is a little problem here. Yeah, so you really have to commit to the butt slam, because sometimes if you don't hold it off properly, it's gonna think you're trying to eat. So there might be a little bit of butthole canceling you can do for these, but it's just something to make note of. Yay! Wait, so many people must yeet. Yay! 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 Yes, you have a pretty good, easy job jumping off at other buildings, so there you go. I want to see something real quick. It's kind of chugging. I'm sorry for that. I'm indeed having fun just inflicting chaos. Look at that! That's meaty right there. That's meaty destruction. Like no one can convince me, not even the developer himself can convince me that the butt slam is not like the most satisfying thing to do to a building. And also, one thing to note is that not only is this an extremely diverse game in terms of just colors for skin, you'll see some people in wheelchairs. So these monsters are not ableist in who they target for their destruction. Oh, there's not a policeman. Yay! Oh, he just absolutely destroyed. Yay! Is that gonna be... Ooh, could it be? Is it enough to hit? That's gonna be a good question. Let me see if I'm gonna be able to hit this across here. Let's see. That's gonna be a good question. Is it? Yes, it is. Oh, the whole thing is chugging so hard right now. It's definitely because of the stream, because I've done this sequence before, and it works fine. So this might be something I actually need to invest in getting a better computer for the future. But yeah, that is meaty. That is nice. I love that. Yay! Yay! Yeah. Beautiful. Absolutely beautiful. Just reveling in the destruction of chaos. As well as they all have such a cute chibi design. He's just like he looks like a little baby, just taking out his aggression. Yay! 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 Splatter! Oh, is that? No, it's not big enough. Okay, so it's definitely gonna be down here enough breaking the foundation. That's another thing. You can kind of just once you jump, if you do this, sometimes you can make it so that you jump off and you're kind of falling. There's the truck again. It's so worth it though. Like, I'm sorry that I'm not able to really present it as best as it possibly can, but if you're able to just play this by yourself and run it, oh my goodness. Since the game is coming to like consoles in the future, I might just stream it from the consoles until I upgrade my PC a little bit more. But just dude, so good. Yay, 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 yay. Yay. Come on. Yay. 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 So now I'll push you in a basket floating down the river, Grandma. Oh, let's see. There's two buildings right here. Oh, tallest one. Yeah, we'll do it like this. Yep. Destroyed. I'm just gonna sit right here. Good. Yes, good. Yes. Crumble. Yes. Good. Look at that jump. Look at him just going up in the air. Little chonkler. This is sort of like Street Fighter now. Look at that. So these are time trials. So right now we've gone to the point in the demo I have not gotten to, but interesting. So that's what that is. Long Island. Yeah, the music in this game is amazing. My goodness. Bloody red asphalt. Destroy 15 cars. Okay. People are fleeing in their cars. Let's teach these people a lesson about how cars are destroying the environment by destroying their environment using their cars. Thanks for the tip! Yes. 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 Yay! 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 Look at that. Oh, what am I getting hit by? Oh, it's a redneck, dude. Let's go. Now it's to the point where it's starting to get a little buggy. Yay! That car better be fine. No. Is it? Yes, it is. Let's go. Yeah, so there's a really good physics engine that's being shown here. No. There we go, nice. Yeah, this is just Mega Ultra Chug right here. Okay, so I take them over. Oh, I have to like throw them into the building. I'm almost gotten way through it. I think definitely if it's gonna be on harder difficulties, you're gonna have to be eating a lot more because right now. Oh wow. Because even with it chugging this hard, I'm not having to worry about my health as much. This may become a problem later in the future. So. Oh, there you are again. How many times do I have to teach you this lesson, old man? I got the record amount I needed to for cars, so that's good. Oh, who am I? Someone else is still attacking me? Yeah. Oof. Yeesh. Jeez. I could definitely say that for a little bit, the eating can be a little wonky at times, but it's not the worst thing in the world. Okay, actually, what I do want to do is destroy it. There we go. I've got my 55%. Okay, perfect. Yo, this is Chug City now. It is literally a slideshow at this point. I'm so sorry. No. It's chugging so bad, I pressed pause and it's not even doing anything. Oh, wow. Yeesh. That's how much is going on the screen for it to be, like, going that hard. But this isn't, and don't hold this against the game. This is literally because of the fact that my computer is kind of old. So even against newer systems, that's just something that's going to be an issue for me. So there is that. Yeah, because there's so many things going on right here. I think what I am going to do is I am going to call it quits for now, and I'm also going to stop sharing the screen. But now that we're going on 3 hours at this point, although there are 6 of you still watching, I'm happy that all of you have indeed enjoyed this. Primarily the videos were what I was going to be doing, and I just wanted to show off a little bit of the gameplay. You guys check it out. Right now it's on Steam, so if you are able to access Steam, please do give it a try and give your thoughts. And just like, sub, all that jazz if you haven't. But that's all, guys. I'm Zimcast, and I'll see you next time.